Meet Ransom, our protagonist. He is the second prince, the absolute darling of the entire kingdom, a guy who could shred through a pack of bloodthirst. Even as a kid, this prodigy clawed his way to the rank of Swordmaster, commanding absolute respect from his peers. But hey, greatness breeds jealousy, and not everyone was a Enter Nagi, a bitter kid dripping with envy. Whenever they were not sparring, this punk was busy dragging the great warrior's name through the mud, challenging Ransom to a PvP match, and openly humiliating him right in front of his little siblings. But the second prince was a master manipulator. He played along, keeping his cool to protect his pride around these absolute clowns. Deep down, though, he was suffocating. Nightmarish flashbacks of his past were slowly eating him alive. The root of that crippling trauma was the brute. One fateful day, a merciless war completely wiped his home off the map. And the absolute worst part, our boy was forced. With the walls crumbling, the queen gave her knight commander one final, heartbreaking order. Forget the kingdom. Grab the kids and run. In her final moments, his mother shoved an ancient relic into the terrified boy's hands, a magical artifact, packed with insane power, buffs, and swore it would give him the strength to rebuild their shattered dynasty. Years of endless running and surviving on the edge of the world finally paid off, forging the prince's body into a lethal. Ransom honestly thought he was prepared for anything, ready to lay down his life for his young wards. But destiny hates giving out breaks, and a brutal new hardcore quest was already breathing down his neck. Storming straight into the enemy stronghold, our Swordmaster clashed with an unbelievably overpowered foe, unleashing every single technique in his arsenal. The chaotic bloodbath ended with the Count lying dead. But one wrong move and Ransom would have been a corpse right beside him. Thankfully, the captain dragged his battered body out of the wreckage, completely draining his own strength in the process. Together they vanished into isolation. Stripped of his royal life, the second prince abandoned his blade grinding until one day his savior decided to break the tension. Elix tosses him a casual greeting from high up on a ladder. Caught off guard but genuinely glad to see his friend Elix, suddenly loses his footing on the wooden rungs. He crashes hard to the dirt, making Ransom's heart skip a beat as he sprints over in a panic. But Elix just waves off the pain, immediately asking for an update on the Count. Ransom sighs, admitting the Count gave them the same old runaround, telling them to wait another month, taking the bad news in stride. Elix shrugs and says they will just have to knock on his door again. Annoyed, Ransom pivots the conversation, chewing Elix out for risking his neck with heavy manual labor. Elix just chuckles, pointing out that he cannot exactly force the little ones to shoulder all the heavy lifting. Ransom fires back sharply, reminding him that those kids are not helpless toddlers anymore. Still, Elix sees right through him, knowing full well that Ransom will always bear the burden of protecting them. Ransom lets out an irritated grunt, predicting that Elix is gearing up to make another one of his incredibly stubborn. Knowing his friend too well, Elix braces for Ransom's incoming rant about how nothing short of a legendary elixir could drag them out of this mess. They both know the lore, an ancient life-restoring miracle supposedly locked away in the depths of the Ilian dungeon hundreds of years ago. But Elix brushes it off as a fairy tale, claiming that magical fixes have zero place in his reality. He tries to kill the depressing mood, staring at the ground. Ransom softly agrees that a miracle like that is probably lost to history forever. Suddenly, panicked shouts rip through the air as the young students scream for their teacher. A massive wooden beam snaps, plummeting straight toward the training yard. Moving entirely on instinct, Elix lunges forward, catching the crushing danger with nothing but his mechanical arm. With the boys safe, he lets out an exhausted groan, complaining that he literally just fixed that roof, and absolutely refuses to rebuild it twice. Tossing a wooden blade back to his trembling student, he barks a firm lesson. The kid whines in defense, swearing he was clutching the hilt as hard as humanly possible. Shaking his head, Elix breaks it down, explaining that true swordsmanship is not just about white-knuckling your grip. Sliding into a flawless stance, he shows them how absolute power starts by planting both. A real fighter, he adds, has to visualize their enemy perfectly before swinging. As he sinks deeper into the demonstration, Elix's eyes darken with a terrifying, razor-sharp focus. That intense tunnel vision rips his mind straight back to a bloody flashback, the exact night Ransom had dragged him from the jaws of death. In his mind's eye, a monstrous assassin, cloaked in blood-red drops. From the shadows, a tidal wave of crimson energy crashes down, forcing Elix to his knees as he fights to hold the line. The crushing weight of the strike pushes him right to the edge of total collapse. In that suffocating moment, the icy breath of death brushes right against his neck. His opponent smirks, mocking him, sneering, that his desperate need to protect others is the very anchor dragging him down. Dropping that vicious truth, the attacker goes for the kill. But Ilex fires back, unleashing a blazing blue counterslash that violently collides. He fiercely grits his teeth, fueled by one undeniable truth. He has lives resting on his shoulders, and he absolutely refuses to die in this wasteland. Instead of backing off his enemy, breaks into a twisted, adrenaline-fueled grin, completely intoxicated by the fierce pushback. Ilex's explosive parry slices across the attacker's grip, forcing the monster to retreat. Ignoring his own bleeding wounds, Ilex violently pushes forward to seize the upper hand. He lunges into the opening with another dazzling blue arc. Then snap! The battlefield dissolves, and back in reality, Ilex's mechanical fingers grip his wooden training. Standing nearby, Ransom keeps a sharp eye on him, practically feeling the ghost of that dark trauma radiating from his rigid posture. A collective gasp sweeps through the courtyard. The students watch totally spellbound as their instructor unintentionally Ilex snaps out of his daze, blinking down at the ruined timber, completely caught off guard by the raw destructive power he just let slip. Rubbing the back of his neck, he stammers out a quick apology, swearing to fix the heavy target he only meant to lightly tap. But the dust barely has time to settle before one look at the kid's pale, terrified face, and Ransom instantly knows things have gone horribly wrong. The boy gasps out that Daisy and Seclin are in deep trouble. In a split second, all the warmth vanishes from Ilex's eyes. Stepping into the shadowy corridors of the old hall, a heavy, suffocating dread washes over him. The metallic stench of fresh blood hits his nose. This is no petty schoolyard brawl. Roaring their names, he bursts into a room to find Daisy and Seclin trading lethal, live steel blows, both already bruised and bleeding. The fiery redhead is Daisy, a proud daughter of the Ilian. Squaring off against her is the blue-haired Seclin, her own kin, from the exact same noble house. A condescending voice echoes. Ilex spots the ambush, and his blood runs absolutely ice-cold. The smirking leader introduces himself as Nagi, a loyal hound of Lord Zeus, and arrogantly demands to know what the hell Ransom thinks he's pulling here. Nagi flashes a sickeningly sweet smile, claiming they are just conducting a harmless little interview. Ilex spits the word back at him, utterly disgusted, already hearing the lethal venom dripping from that lie. Nagi casually adds that if Daisy and Seclin show enough raw talent, he plans to drag them straight into his own twisted bloodline. The sheer thought of Nagi poisoning these kids with his corrupt lineage makes Ilex sick to his stomach. But Nagi just sneers brutally, reminding him that even the absolute gutter of their family tree completely. That vicious jab hits dead center, dredging up the crushing, agonizing reality of his ruined body and shattered past. Gripping his sword, Ilex demands to know if Count Zaius authorized this circus. Nagi barks a harsh laugh, bragging that a man of the Count's stature doesn't. Leaning in, Nagi relentlessly presses the issue, tauntingly, asking why Ilex was foolish enough to waltz completely alone into their family's domain. Ilex fires right back. He declares that he walked straight into the fire, fully aware of the danger, all because of a disturbing rumor that the legendary Swordmaster Ransom had. Nagi smirks, revealing that he was the one who deliberately leaked those rumors, using a bunch of. The horrifying weight of that trap clicks into place, and Ilex, with a twisted grin, Nagi cruelly mocks whether a broken-down has-been like Ransom can actually shield these kids in his pathetic condition. His voice dropping to a lethal whisper, Ilex gives them one final warning. Nagi rolls his eyes at the threat, bursting into laughter as he questions if this cripple even has the muscle to swing a blade. Ilex lets his blade do the talking, launching himself forward like a bullet before Nagi can even finish his smug sentence. But Nagi's elite guards instantly swarm him, trapping Ilex and tracking their flawless footwork. Ilex immediately clocks these goons as trained experts, not your average street thugs. But expert or not, they are still light years beneath him. He grits his teeth, deciding it's time to brutally remind these arrogant fools what a real swordmaster. Blocking every single one of their incoming blades at once, he roars that a master of the sword is never someone you dare to disrespect. Searing blue aura erupts from his mechanical grip, surging directly into his weapon. With one devastating sweeping slash, he unleashes a shockwave that the massive blast literally rips through the hall, sending the heavily armed guards flying like ragdolls. As the stone floor shatters beneath them, slowly clapping his hands, Nagi watches the carnage with a chuckling that the great Ransom is clearly just as terrifying as the legends say. Unfazed Ilex glares at him with dead eyes, coldly whispering that these arrogant rookies truly have absolutely no. Nagi's grin stretches from ear to ear. He chides Ilix to lighten up, brushing off the kid's terror. You can't blame them for shaking, he chuckles. Not when they're staring dead at a monster. Unfazed, Ilix fires back that underneath all that swagger, Nagi is just as insecure around him as he was back in the... That single word hits a nerve. Nagi's eyes twitch with a mix of offended. Daisy and Seiklin gasp, wide-eyed. They can't believe their teacher just threw raw bait straight into the beast's jaw. Nagi's smug facade instantly crumbles. A blood-red aura erupts around him, suffocating the room in pure rage. Panic spikes in Ilix's chest. He knows his battered running isn't an option anymore. He has to end this right here, right now, betting everything on one flawless, lethal blow. Crackling blue energy engulfs Ilix. He rockets into the air, but Nagi just stands there calmly planting his feet. Cloaked in crimson mana, Ilix spots a fatal blind spot and thinks he's won. He unleashes a devastating wave of energy designed to cleave through bone and steel alike. Yet a split second later, a cold dread washes over Ilix. The strike connects with nothing but air. Nagi dances right through the deadly arc, closing the gap until they're chest to chest. Sparks violently explode as their weapons clash. What happened to you, old man? Nagi taunts with a sickening smirk. He exposes the ugly truth. Ilix's mana core is totally shattered. Ilix freezes, horrified that his darkest secret is laid. Nagi gloats, bragging that he didn't claw his way to the absolute pinnacle by being blind. To him, this pathetic display just validates that pure noble bloodlines will always reign supreme. As Ilix stumbles, coughing up blood, Nagi playfully taps his chin. Now what to do with you? His sadistic gaze slides past the broken man. Maybe I'll just snap their little necks, one by one, he purrs. Ilix's knuckles turn white. He grips a concealed dagger inside his coat, weighing his absolute last resort. Slowly, silently, he inches the hidden blade from it. He prepares to throw his life on the line for us. But Nagi coos at him with a sickeningly soft tone, drinking in the sweet nectar of his enemy's The fight drains out of the old master. Ilix swallows his burning pride. Please, stop, he chokes out. The kids have nothing to do with this. Nagi blinks, genuinely thrown off guard. Then a dark, euphoric realization dawns on him. The great hero is begging him. He bursts into hysterical laughter, ridiculing the legendary swordsman for groveling like a dog. Ilix doesn't even try to deny it. There's no room for ego when dealing with a monster of Nagi's caliber. He knows Nagi doesn't just want to win. The sick bastard wants to grind his soul into the dirt and listen to it snap. With a twisted grin, Nagi decides he's going to drag this out. Ilix just drops his gaze, swallowing the bitter humiliation to keep his students breathing. I could use a good stretch, Nagi sneers, totally relishing his prey's utter helplessness. Without warning, his fist rockets forward, exploding against Ilix's jaw. Before the old man can even flinch, another sledgehammer hook connects. Nagi turns him into a living punching bag, painting the floor with the master's blood. Grabbing him by the collar, Nagi brutally body slams him into the concrete. He kicks the limp warrior aside like discarded trash, then casually crushes his heavy boot onto Ilix's. Nagi grinds his heel down, burying Ilix's face into the shattered stone. Beneath the crushing weight, an agonizing gasp escapes Ilix's bloody lips. The desperate whisper catches Nagi's ear. He tilts his head, eyes narrowing with cold, calculating interest. That sadistic smirk slowly creeps back up his face as he realizes the old fool isn't begging for mercy. He's apologizing to his students. Look at you, Nagi spits in disgust. You've finally gone pathetic and soft. Bored with his broken toy, Nagi calls it quits for the day. We'll pick this back up tomorrow, he promises the trembling kids, letting that terrifying threat hang in the air as he swags. The instant he's gone, pure chaos erupts. The young disciples are in, but Ilix, coughing through the pain, flashes a weak, gentle smile. He assures them that taking a beating is a cheap price to pay as long as hours bleed away. A chilling, perfectly round. The dead silence of the midnight courtyard is a sharp contrast to the thick, suffocating tension choking the rooms. Behind closed doors, an exhausted Ilix demands answers. He glares straight at Daisy, his voice dropping to a dangerous hush. Were you actually trying to become a bloodline lackey? Seiklin immediately shrinks, bowing his head in deep, shameful regret. But Daisy, she doesn't utter a single syllable. She stands there like a brick wall, arms tightly crossed, desperately fighting back the storm raging in her eyes. Ilix doesn't let up. Well, do you have anything? She doesn't back down. Scowling, she calls his whole lecture a load of garbage and demands the raw truth. Why? She snaps defensively. Why exactly am I forbidden from pledging my loyalty to Lord Gia? She throws his own past right back in his face, reminding him that he used to be a loyal attack dog for that exact same. Don't act like you know a damn thing about it, Ilix roars, finally snapping. Have you completely blacked out what that monster actually did to us? He drags the horrific truth into the light. Lord Zeus's sickening obsession with turning into an immortal vampire was what got their families and brothers in arms brutally. A gruesome flashback flashes across the screen. Mangled corpses, oceans of blood, and the catastrophic price of one man's greed. The fire in Daisy's eyes flickers out. Biting her lip, she bitterly whispers that her life is already an irreparable, ruined mess. Lansing viciously tears into her, his voice dripping with ice, as he completely trashes her idea of selling her soul to a man just to survive. He pushes even harder, utterly disgusted by the sickening thought of her staying alive. Daisy finally snaps. Tears streaming down her face, she screams at him, demanding to know who the hell gave him the right to play God and judge her death. This is her life, her mess to fix. She viciously orders him. Suffocating under the heavy, unbearable tension, Daisy spins on her heel and bolts from the room, completely ignoring Lansing as he shouts her name. Bam! The heavy wooden door slams shut, instantly sucking the fiery rage out of the air. A dead, suffocating silence violently swallows the cabin. The thick, uncomfortable tension practically chokes them. Lansing just stares blankly at the closed door, completely rattled by the explosive blowout that just went. Seclin breaks the ice, softly reminding him that her vicious words were just born from pure, desperate anger, not her true feelings. Lansing sighs heavily. A painful memory flashes behind his eyes. A dark time he was forced to his knees, utterly crushed by sheer, agonizing helplessness. That bitter flashback reminds him of a hard truth. Sometimes, reading him like an open book, Seclin quietly points out that Lansing is clearly tearing himself apart on the inside. Desperate to ease his friend's pain, Seclin jumps up quickly, offering to sprint over and grab a potent healing elixir from. Lansing's rigid posture softens for a split second as he starts to whisper his thanks. But boom! Before the heartwarming moment can even settle, Burson suddenly kicks. When a confused Lansing asks what the hell is going on, the breathless older man spills everything. Little Lena had just confessed to him. Apparently Lena overheard Daisy panicking about Lansing and Nagy getting into a brutal death match. Paralyzed by absolute terror, the poor trembling girl had run straight to him, practically begging for someone to intervene and stop the bloodshed. Right on cue, Lena tightly grips Burson's coat. Her face flushing, she whines loudly, protesting that Daisy swore to keep her mouth shut. Beside her, Burson nervously scratches his head sheepishly, admitting he Watching this incredibly awkward, heartwarming, chaotic mess unfold, a tiny, genuine chuckle finally escapes Lansing's lips. The suffocating gloom shatters. For the first time in what feels like a warm, deeply grateful smile crosses his face as he thanks Burson, Lena, and Seclin for actually giving a damn about him. Seeing the opening, Lansing slowly reaches out his cold, heavily damaged mechanical fingers, gently wrapping around the crimson medicine. Staring deeply at the glowing liquid, he silently sends a heartfelt thank you to Daisy wherever she is. Outside, the night feels incredibly peaceful. But that tranquil illusion does not last long. The very second he tries to catch his breath, a violently brutal coughing fit rips through his chest. He immediately doubles over in sheer agony, exposing just how his shattered metal prosthetic violently trembles, sparking slightly, as it desperately gripping his chest. A dark, bitter thought violently crosses his mind. If his inner core was not completely wrecked, wiping the floor with suddenly a warm, golden memory of innocent kids laughing and sprinting during much happier days bleeds into his racing thoughts. He tightly clenches his jaw, keeping those precious kids, but reality crashes back down like a ton of bricks. The clock is furiously ticking, and he knows damn well that Nagy is coming back for blood tomorrow. Glaring down at his totally mangled, useless arm, a grim left with absolutely zero alternatives, he makes a drastic choice. He has to activate the highly classified royal artifact. A blindingly brilliant surge of blue magic aggressively erupts from the metal plating. The alien-looking construct suddenly locks into place, hovering directly over his palm. His crazy plan. He is going to illegally pawn off a priceless, legendary treasure belonging to the Van Roa royal bloodline, just to score enough cash to secure the kid's future. But pawning a massively recognizable crown jewel is pure suicide. guaranteed to bring elite assassins straight to his door. Weighing the massive risks, he finally, even while channeling his intense energy to summon the damn thing, he privately scoffs, admitting he never really understood why a dusty old tome was ever. With a heavy thud, the massive book slams open. Instantly, the bizarre ancient ink begins. The bizarre runes literally crawl off the parchment, twisting and floating in midair like a living, breathing entity before forming a perfectly readable, glowing hologram. The text details the exact coordinates of an underground, heavily guarded cultist chapel, tied to a specific date deep in the ancient past. Lansing's jaw physically drops, but before his brain can even process that massive bombshell, the book violently explodes with a blinding, terrifying flash of force, aggressively sucking him straight into the pages. Intense visions of an ornate, regal medallion, and dozens of complex, the chaotic swirling vision rapidly collapses inward, shattering like a massive splash of liquid light. As back in the dusty cabin, the heavy curtains wildly whip through the air, violently disrupted by the massive magical tear in reality. In the blink of an eye, the room is completely abandoned, leaving behind nothing but a quiet table and a knocked-over chair. Meanwhile, Lansing violently jolts. His body is already moving. He suddenly realizes he is actively marching right alongside a massive crowd of creepy hooded. Even as he physically sprints in perfect sync with the weird cultists, sheer panic sets in. Why the hell is his body automatically acting like he belongs to their twisted group? He violently touches a stone wall. This is absolutely no illusion. This place is 100% physically real. Glancing around, he realizes the towering architecture. Trapped in a massive sea of completely unidentifiable robed fanatics, his mind furiously races to piece this insane puzzle together. Suddenly, a shout rings out, declaring that a trespasser has breached the sanctuary. The high priest barks an order to lock down the elixir immediately. That single word sends a shockwave through Lance, and it is the exact prize he desperately needs. Piecing together the pristine dungeon, the ancient date, and the true origin of this miraculous draft, it all clicks. He has landed in the exact era when the treasure was first sealed away. The massive weight of reality crashes down on him. He has leaped 10,000 years into the past. Masking his presence, he steps lightly on his prosthetic leg, blending seamlessly into the shadows. Up ahead, fanatics swarm a stone pedestal, tightly guarding the glowing vial. Witnessing this up close strips away any lingering doubts. Staring directly at the mythical brew proves he is breathing the air of a smirking zealot boasts to the group that their holy treasure is completely secure. Lurking in their ranks, Lanson knows one truth. If he snatches it right now, he can reclaim his shattered life. He sweeps his gaze over the dark robes, calculating the odds. 12 targets in total. Way too many for a reckless frontal assault. He seriously debates slaughtering them all to snatch the elixir, but he forces himself to stand down. The cult leader pivots, dividing the squad to hunt down the trespasser before moving their sacrifice. He dispatches 2-man teams to lock down the east and west corridors. But when the North Passage team is called, Lanson goes rigid. His own assumed name just echoed through the chamber. The grimoire must be messing with their minds, twisting their perception to view him as one of their own. Only high-tier cognitive manipulation could weave such a flawless disguise. Suddenly, a nearby cultist snaps at him to move. Scolded for dragging his feet, Lanson snaps to attention and nudges his new partner forward, playing along to keep his cover intact. He opts to scout the area and wait for the perfect strike. The duo marches deeper into the dark tunnel. Dancing torchlight paints the jagged stone walls with shifting fiery shadows. They push through the decaying hall, completely blind to the threat lurking ahead. A blonde warrior materializes out of the gloom, blocking their path. She glares at them with an eerie, ice-cold focus. Lanson's muscles tighten instantly. Every instinct screams that she is a totally... In a flash, she unleashes a blinding purple arc. A suffocating wave of killing intent crashes over him. She pivots, carving the very air with a massive sweeping blade. This is not normal mana. A bizarre, glassy ripple distorts the space around her weapon. The shockwave closes in before he can process it. He channels a desperate blue energy blade from his mechanical arm, barely catching the collision sends a vicious tremor up his shoulder. He skids backward, overwhelmed by her raw power. Digging his heels in, he finds his energy blade cracked but holding. The corridor sparks to life as sapphire and violet forces lock together. He glances down, spotting jagged chips along his edge. A single clash was enough to fracture his aura. Realizing just how freakish her strength is, he forces his breathing to slow, burying his rising panic. Across the hall, the blonde fighter narrows her eyes, sensing this. Her sharp reaction proves his theory. This anomalous energy is absolutely real, not a trick of his mind. He contemplates taking another hit to analyze her strange technique before making his next move. Out of the corner of his eye, he spots a huddle of bruised, terrified children shaking in the shadows. The horrific sight knocks the wind out of him, and he gasps, questioning why innocent kids are trapped in this hell. The warrior spits with disgust, branding him absolute human trash. She snarls, accusing him of dragging them here, to be butchered as living offerings. Her venomous words hit like a physical blow, flashing him back to the cozy, laughing dinner table he fought so hard to protect. The stark contrast hardens his iron resolve. Meanwhile, the cultists catch wind of the scuffle and stampede toward the chaos. They shout that the intruder must have cornered one of their brothers. While they scream for reinforcements, Lanson beats them to the punch. A devastating crescent of blue light explodes from his arm, slicing through the charging cultists in a single, brutal flash. The warrior and the trembling kids just gape in pure shock. Lanson slowly turns to her, offering a temporary truce to crush their common enemy. Her eyes widen, completely blindsided by his proposal. But the quiet moment shatters as a fresh wave of enemies floods the corridor. Deranged cultists sprint down the hall, weapons drawn. Amidst the blood and frenzy, their wild eyes lock onto Ransom, the primary target. Panicked shouts echo through the hall as they assume he's under attack, desperately screaming for backup. But the blonde swordswoman instantly steps up, intercepting a charging. She holds the line with flawless precision. Watching her deadly grace, Ransom connects the dots. She's the perfect weapon to aim right back at this cult. He effortlessly drops another fanatic with a single brutal slash. Choking on his own blood, the dying cultist stares up at Ransom, his eyes wide with absolute shock. Gasping for air, the man spits out a final, damning curse, accusing Ransom of cold-blooded betrayal. Crimson splatters across the floor as the heavy word. The air freezes. Both Ransom and the swordswoman stop dead in their tracks. Completely caught off, Ransom doesn't miss a beat. He smoothly gaslights the entire room, casually thanking the swordswoman for distracting the guy so he could land the easy kill. She just stares at him, utterly bewildered by the insane lie he just spun out of. Without breaking a sweat, he flips the narrative into a textbook case of self-defense. He casually claims the fanatic just lunged at him like a total maniac, and he simply had no choice but to put him down. Giving her a sly look, he urges her to keep up the excellent teamwork. Suddenly, a hulking cultist steps out of the shadow. The giant silently studies Ransom, deeply unsettled by his completely unreadable vibe. Looming over the fresh corpse, the massive fanatic directly challenges Ransom, demanding to know if the kill was an actual double-cross. He starts raving about the dark energy radiating from the twisted by the agonizing sting of betrayal. Ransom stays dead silent as the brute rambles on, explaining how the pure chaos of backstabbing acts like steroids for their dark magic. With a sick grin, the fanatic adds that sacrificing a high and mighty knight would make the ultimate offering for their dark lord, laying bare the grim fate of the kidnapped kids, and exactly what they plan to do with the swordswoman. Reading the room, the blonde warrior mentally kicks herself for rushing in without reinforcements. A chilling realization washes over her as she shoots Ransom a second, highly suspicious look. Huddled behind her, the traumatized children watch the standoff, trembling between raw terror and swallowing her pride. She lays her cards on the table, confessing she's only an intermediate-tier fighter. Knowing damn well she can't solo the juggernaut in front of them, she pitches a desperate gamble. She'll act as the vanguard while Ransom waits for the perfect blind spot. Without hesitating, she launches forward, unleashing a blistering assault to pry open his defenses. But the giant doesn't even flinch. He tanks her blade head-on and swats her away with overwhelming brutal momentum. She hits the ground gasping, horrified by the sheer, ungodly gap in their physicals. Before she can blink, his heavy weapon crashes down with earth-shattering rage. The entire corridor violently quakes as concrete and debris explode into the air. Biting back the pain, she pushes through the smoke, charging back into the fray with a wild, desperate fury. But it's no use. The cult leader catches her razor-sharp strike barehanded, flashing a psychotic smirk as he completely nullifies her momentum. Roar! He hoists his massive weapon high, ready to cleave her in two. Time slows down. The blonde warrior realizes she just walked straight into her own grave. But in that exact microsecond, Ransom's eyes go ice cold. A sinister dark blue aura violently erupts around him. Instead of backing away, he steps right into the eye of the storm, He detonates from his stance, blurring across the room with terrifying velocity. He intercepts a creeping assassin, parrying the lethal strike before the blade even drops. The blonde fighter's jaw practically hits the floor at his suicidal bravery. Suddenly a hidden pendant beneath, triggering a powerful, dormant artifact right in the nick of time. Ransom absorbs the bone-rattling shockwave of the blast, clenching his jaw, as agony shoots through his veins. A blood-red aura blade, aimed straight for his neck, violently deflects off the invisible shield. The assassin's eyes widen, realizing that glowing trinket just robbed him of a guaranteed kill. The hallway descends into absolute madness. Ransom becomes a blur of motion, desperately trading blows with a swarm of hooded The assassins quickly realize that magic shield or not, the kid's swordplay is disturbingly flawless. As Ransom silently respects how the blonde knight managed to survive this meat grinder, the lead fanatic sneers, winding up for a cowardly, lethal backstab. Refusing to let him die, the blonde warrior hurls her battered body into the weapon's path. Coughing and trembling from exhaustion, she snaps at Ransom fiercely, demanding to know why the hell he jumped into her fight. Ransom barely registers her yelling. His eyes are glued to the radiant, utterly baffled as to how someone with such raw elite talent can fight so pathetically. Overhearing them, the scarred assassin bitterly laughs, mocking himself as a washed-up failure who unlocked yet fundamentally failed to grasp the true essence of the blade. Before either of them can process his twisted rant, the fanatic violently lunges, slashing the blonde warrior straight up. She goes flying like a rag doll, slamming into the concrete as her sword clatters out of reach. The butcher stalks forward with a sadistic, triumphant grin, knowing he just won the jackpot. He mockingly waves goodbye to Ransom, throwing his own insult back in his face, calling the boy nothing more than a pathetic. That mockery sparks a blazing rage in Ransom. Memories flood his mind, every ounce of agony he endured drenched in his own blood, but refusing to bow. He sets out to prove a deadly point. Even a so-called flawed weapon can still strike a lethal blow. He triggers a brutal technique known as aura thread, compressing his raw energy into a single razor-sharp wire. Before the ambushers can even blink, the glowing azure line rips right through them. The ringleader stumbles back, absolutely rattled, as Ransom's presence explodes into a The devastating strike carves a trench straight down the hallway. Throwing their own insult right back in their faces, he gives them a front-row seat to the sheer carnage a half-baked swordsman can unleash. The cloaked assassin scrambles to throw up a guard, his blade clashing against the glowing blue wire, just inches from his jugular. In a heartbeat, the killer's cocky demeanor crumbles into pure, icy dread. Gritting his teeth, Ransom forces the strike forward with absolutely merciless. With a sharp crack, the assassin's weapon shatters under the crushing weight. The moment the clash ends, Ransom collapses to one knee, violently. His battered physique has officially hit its breaking point. Sprawled on the ground nearby, the blonde woman stares at him in absolute shock. Slumping to the floor, even the bleeding assassin locks. Paying zero attention to the lingering threats, Ransom drags his broken body toward the lifeless killer, frantically tearing through the dead man's clothes. His blood-stained fingers finally brush against a tiny wooden casing concealed deep inside. Popping the lid reveals the exact glass vial he had been praying for. And he unseals the cork, knowing damn well that swallowing this mysterious liquid is the only way he survives the night. Pushing herself up onto her knees, the blonde woman shouts out, demanding to know what on earth he is about to consume. But right before the glass touches his lips, a sudden impact smacks the vial away, sending the precious fluid splashing. Totally bewildered, she scrambles toward Ransom's limp form, staring down at the tragic puddle of ruined medicine. Yet, as the glowing droplets seep into the cracks, the runaway elixir awakens the artifact, detonating a massive wave of temporal magic. Above the crumbling ruins, the starry sky freezes completely. Meanwhile, safely back at the estate, Daisy paces the halls, deeply troubled by her brother's sudden midnight disappearance. Discovering that he slipped into the dangerous night without a word, she makes up her mind to swallow her pride and finally apologize. Brushing past the late hour, she rushes toward his bedroom on the slim hope he has returned. But the second she twists the doorknob, Ransom is crumpled on the floor, absolutely drenched in gore. Thrashing in panic, she screams out her brother's name. Though completely passed out, his bloody knuckles still maintain a death grip on that tiny wooden box, treating it like his most prized possession. Hearing the commotion, a suffocating, anxious silence fills the room as they surround his lifeless body. Daisy fiercely refuses to leave his bedside, prompting Burson to step out with instructions to fetch him the moment Once the heavy wooden door clicks shut behind Burson, Daisy is left entirely alone in the quiet room. Still, she keeps a silent, tearful vigil straight through the dark hours. A crushing wave of guilt eats at her soul, haunted by the thought that a man so impossibly strong, the shame spirals so deep, she feels entirely unworthy of living. But a sudden jagged gasp from the bed shatters her dark thoughts as Ransom finally shifts under the covers. Blinking away the haze, a shocking realization slams into his brain. He only managed to swallow half of that glowing medicine before the world twisted inside out. He shoots up like a rocket, his chest heaving. His mind reels as he desperately scans the room, utterly bewildered, to find himself resting safely beneath his own blankets. For a split second he wonders if that nightmarish bloodbath was nothing but a fever dream. Then his eyes lock onto Daisy sitting right next to him. Caught between massive relief and sheer Ransom just stares at her, completely speechless, as the violent, vivid memories of the previous timeline flood his thoughts. But one specific detail anchors him. She just called him brother. Her face burning red, Daisy stammers out a quick denial, though her puffy, tear-streaked eyes tell him exactly how much she was mourning him. A faint smirk crosses his face as he teases her about being so worried. She instantly snaps back, her voice cracking, as she yells that of course she was terrified. Softening his gaze, Ransom drops a gentle hand on her head and sincerely thanks her, sparking a nostalgic tenderness in his chest that has been dead for years. He takes a quiet breath, deeply savoring this rare, genuine moment of family bonding. But without warning, an intense, fiery sensation explodes deep within. Daisy shrieks in sheer panic as he doubles over, terrified that his gruesome injuries are ripping open again. But as he grits his teeth, a wild wave of awe washes over Ransom. This is not the agony of torn flesh. It is undeniable proof that the temporal miracle actually worked. Daisy can only watch in absolute wonder as the heavy metal and gears of his prosthetic limbs loosen and clatter uselessly to the floor. Where artificial legs once stood, completely restored, standing tall on his own 2 feet, his shattered body flawlessly healed, Ransom declares that what was stolen from him is final. Daisy covers her mouth, absolutely speechless at the impossible scene. Brimming with victory, Ransom announces to the room that he has officially made his comeback. She sprints straight into his arms, crying out for her brother. Grabbing onto his shoulders, she stares in absolute awe at his fully grown limbs, giggling and sobbing all at once as she squeezes his hands just to make sure. Ransom just blinks deeply, moved by her overwhelm. The rest of the manor staff floods into the hallway, jaws dropping at the absolute miracle standing right in front of them. Tears stream down Burson's weathered face as he begs to know how this could even. Ransom keeps it incredibly simple, casually mentioning that he downed a high. Burson almost passes out just thinking about the astronomical price tag of a single drop. But before he can ask for details, Ransom cuts the celebration short, stating he has one crucial. He flexes his newly grown muscles, prompting Burson to gently warn him that he might need some intense physical therapy to get completely used to moving again. But there is no denying it. The healing is 100% genuine. Ignoring the warnings, Ransom snatches up the carved wooden box. He shoots Burson a serious look and orders the old man to follow him. Arriving back at the crumbling ruins, Ransom pieces the puzzle together, figuring out that the miracle potion must have originally sat right on top of the decaying altar. Looking incredibly nervous, Burson asks why on earth they dragged themselves back to this creepy wasteland. In response, Ransom pops open the container, revealing a wildly glowing key. His mind flashes back to the initial raid, remembering how the back of this collapsed temple was heavily swarming with way more guards than the main. Putting 2 and 2 together, he is dead set on the idea that this glowing trinket, the second he funnels his energy into the key, a massive, blazing magical crest erupts across the solid stone wall. The ancient stone groans, and both men just stand there, their jaws practically hitting the floor, as the intricate gears click into place. Lurking just beyond the threshold is an untouched, forgotten treasury, absolutely overflowing with heavy chests of pure gold. Burson's eyes widen instantly doing the math, and realizing the sheer amount of gold bars alone could buy out a massive city. But Ransom looks right past the cash his gaze locked onto. The legendary weapons, heavy armor sets, and enchanted gear stacked in the corners. Snapping out of his greed, Burson grabs Ransom's arm, his brain completely short-circuiting, as he tries to connect this hidden jackpot to his master's magically regrown limbs. Taking a deep breath, Ransom confesses. Then he drops the ultimate bombshell. He actually leaped through time, traveling exactly 10,000 years into the past to this exact same spot. Burson stutters, completely failing to form a logical sentence, but seeing the old man's absolute shock only solidifies Ransom's own confidence that mind-bending journey through time was actually 100. A terrifyingly brilliant thought crosses his mind. If this temporal artifact, he could literally rewind the clock as many times as he wants. With a cheat code like that in his hands, he realizes he has a guaranteed shortcut to abs. However, he waves the old man off, stating firmly that he has to squash a highly annoying bug before doing anything else. His eyes instantly go ice cold. His entire aura radiates. Cut to a completely different location where the blood-sucking master swordsman is currently lounging around, completely drunk, chilling casually among a pile of lifeless bodies. He takes a deep breath, totally loving the scent of victory, wondering what kind of sick entertainment today will offer. Yelling out Ransom's name in a mocking sing-song tone, he kicks the front doors open, dragging his loyal lackeys along to go point and laugh at the use. But the second the heavy doors swing open, his smile completely vanishes. Stepping out into the courtyard, he finds Ransom casually leaning against a pillar, fully intact, armed, and the bloodsucker tries to play it cool, laughing and asking if the trash really dragged his broken body all the way here, just to say hello. But his smug attitude instantly shatters into a million. His jaw drops as he intensely stares at the two perfectly grounded. Panic finally sets in. Realizing how incredibly dangerous this situation is, he screams at his grunts to sprint back and warn the big boss that their target. Not even flinching, Ransom smoothly pulls his blade from its sheath, completely blocking the exit. He explodes off the ground, unleashing a blinding neon blue aura slash that completely defies the speed of sound. The blood-sucking freak barely even twitches before the lethal wave is already. The devastating shockwave rips straight across his chest before he can even raise his guard. The raw kinetic force is so insane that it violently blasts. Without missing a single beat, Ransom spins and violently slices the second. In the blink of an eye, the entire backup squad is wiped off the map, leaving the arrogant master completely alone on the battlefield. The villains start sweating bullets, absolutely terrified that this kid just casually slaughtered his elite guards like they were nothing. Meanwhile, Ransom stands there looking like the Grim Reaper himself, ice cold. A sinister, ocean-deep blue energy violently spirals around his sword arm, buzzing with electric intensity as he charges up his next signature. He rockets forward, utilizing thin, spiderweb-like strands of aura to zigzag across the courtyard in a completely unpredictable pattern. Panicking, the vampiric boss desperately yanks. Crimson red and neon blue energy violently slam into each other, creating a massive. But right in the middle of the clash, the bloodsucker notices a crucial detail. Ransom is still relying on thin aura strings, instead of forging a solid energy blade. The villain sneers, assuming Ransom's mana core is still fractured and weak. Ransom's only response. Dropping into a low. Shrugging off the silent threat, the enemy charges forward. But Ransom unleashes a blinding surge of azure energy, dead set on finishing this clash right now. The aristocratic freak gloats that he isn't the same weakling from 3 years back, proudly announcing that he is a pure-blooded direct descendant of the Count. He brags that his newly evolved body boasts super. To prove it, a sickening blood-red vampiric aura erupts from his blade, violently multiplying his strength. In this demonic form, he arrogantly claims even a legendary Swordmaster would drop dead at his feet. But Ransom's azure slash crashes headfirst into that crimson weapon. The villain's smug grin vanishes as the searing blue light effortlessly shatters his defense. Before the aristocrat can even blink, the glowing steel tears right through his throat. His severed head thuds into the dirt, eyes wide with pure shock, right as his. So much for his so-called immortal healing factor. Panting heavily, Ransom feels the steady thrum of his fully restored mana core, though his chaotic aura desperately needs to be reined in. Golden morning sunlight washes over the shattered courtyard, signaling the end of the bloodbath. Once the dust settles, Daisy presses him again, demanding to know if he seriously traveled back in time to chug a mythical elixir. Nodding, Ransom drops a bombshell. The ancient heirloom of the Van Roa royal family was the exact trigger that hurled him across the centuries. While they analyze the cryptic relic, the older gentleman wonders if Ransom can trigger another time jump. Shaking his head, the young warrior confesses the artifact has been completely dead since his return. Sir Malone chimes in, theorizing that only a relic, forged during the forgotten age of magic, could pull off a miracle like temporal displacement. Staring at his hands, Ransom finds it hard to swallow that a pocket-sized trinket holds literal god-tier reality-bending magic. Then the red-haired girl spots a massive loophole. If he consumed the potion 10,000 years ago, why did history say it was unearthed a mere 200 years ago? Her sharp logic hits Ransom like a ton of bricks. It suddenly clicks he must have gulped down only half the vial before snapping back to the present day. He desperately asks if historical texts ever mention discovering just half a dose, but the veteran clarifies that the exact volume was never documented. A chilling thought creeps into Ransom's mind. There is absolutely no way to know if the history books were always vaguely written or if he actively rewrote the timeline himself. He weighs the terrifying options. Either only a fraction of the legendary liquid existed in the original timeline, or his reckless past actions permanently ripped up. The red-haired girl gives him a dead serious warning. If he ever leaps back again, a single footprint could reshape the fate of the entire planet. Staring him down, she demands to know what he would actually do if he fully controlled that reality-warping power. Closing his eyes, Ransom faces the burning truth he has kept buried deep in his soul. All he craves is raw, unadulterated vengeance for the night his parents and the agonizing flashback turns his eyes to ice. Standing tall, he vows that as the final surviving royal of Manhwa, his ultimate mission is resurrecting his ruined empire from the ashes. But before he can lay a single brick of his new kingdom, he has to personally rip Count Klaus's heart out. Bitter regret floods his chest. He remembers foolishly trusting Klaus and the Lord of Kushan, blindly hoping that acting as their loyal dog would keep his family safe. Now he knows the ugly truth. Peace built on the back of a tyrant's mercy. She quickly snaps him back to reality. Klaus isn't just a basic villain. He was already a monstrous swordmaster, long before he injected himself with Delkish's true blood. Ransom doesn't flinch. He knows this brutal showdown is entirely inescapable, especially since Klaus might lash out unpredictably once he realizes. She lays it out perfectly straight. An all-out war with the Count is bound to happen. Checking the timeline. Ransom remembers that Klaus's monthly tax tribute is due in exactly 3 weeks. He makes a firm decision to wipe the Count off the map, but with the target locked, the narrative pivots directly into hardcore prep mode, standing completely alone in the debris-filled courtyard. Correcting his posture, he intensely tries to mimic the flawless combat techniques he witnessed during his time jump. His mind flashes back to the ancient cult leader from 10,000 years ago, analyzing how the man's lethal, hyper-precise strikes shredded through enemies like paper. What truly blew him away was its unbreakable resolve and sheer grit. He still feels the ghostly sting of that razor-sharp aura charging every single swing. An old rival's sneer suddenly rings in his head, laughing at how flashy, glowing aura blades mean absolutely nothing if you don't grasp their true essence. That bitter memory cuts right to the core of his biggest flaw. He's been blindly copying raw power without ever truly understanding the soul of his weapon. Closing his eyes, the cold metal in his grip shifts. He isn't just swinging a piece of steel anymore. He's actually speaking to it. The bond intensifies, melting the boundary between flesh and steel until he literally becomes the weapon. A blinding spark of realization finally shatters his mental wall. Feeling the rush firsthand, the cryptic words of that ancient grandmaster finally click into place. The swirling tempest wrapping around his blade isn't just some run-of-the-mill aura. But right at the peak of his awakening, the doors fly open, and the fiery-haired girl bursts into the room, gasping for breath with a critical up. Count Cyrus is finally making his play. The camera pans away, plunging us straight into the heart of the tyrant's looming shadow. Deep inside the Lord's fortress, a sniveling lackey bows to Cyrus, confirming that the Ransom bloodline has been summoned to the estate in exactly 3 days. A wicked grin stretches across Cyrus's face. He's been itching for this exact moment, eagerly plotting to butcher the high-born elites of Manhwa as mere lambs for the slaughter. Cutting back to our crew, Ransom's gut twists. This whole setup stinks, especially since this sudden summon dropped right before the massive tax deadlines. The grizzled veteran strokes his chin, wondering if the mad Count somehow sniffed out Ransom's miraculous recovery and figured out that Nagi is lying in a shallow grave. Ransom shakes his head. The odds of that are slim to none. The girl slices through the theories, pointing out the glaring nightmare this unexpected party invite just completely torpedoed their assassination plot. She lays it out plain and simple. Their one golden window to slit the tyrant's throat was during one of his twisted, secluded ceremonies. Ever since her own brother was mutated into a monster, she's been shadowing the Count's every move, noting how he creeps out of the mansion solo, to conduct his dark arts. The fiery redhead shudders, confessing she watched with her own 2 eyes as Cyrus's goons snatched innocent kids off the streets. Pulling back the curtain on his pure evil, she drops a bombshell: he actively massacres any village that comes up short on taxes, harvesting both fresh corpses and crying toddlers to fuel his demonic offerings. Ransom physically recoils. The guy he used to know is now butchering humans and breathing victims for some ungodly cosmic nightmare. It hits him like a freight train. While he was rusting away in a wheelchair, totally cut off, his entire world plunged headfirst into an abyss of absolute madness. Mind reeling from the sheer scale of the horror he locks eyes with, her demanding to know how she dug up all this classified intel. She just shrugs it off, casually dropping that she pieced together her own underground spy ring. Ransom's jaw practically... He can't fathom how she navigated this shark-infested city completely solo. Waving off his shock, she fiercely steers them back to reality, insisting the only is that their initial playbook is burnt to ashes. The seasoned veteran chuckles, gently nudging Ransom that the girl is a fully grown badass now. But the creeping dread of what she survived still gnaws at the fiery redhead. Suddenly bites her lip, freezing in place. Haunted by the looming bloodbath, she finally chokes out the one terrifying question suffocating the room. Do they even stand a snowball's chance in hell against a monster like Cyrus? Ransom's gaze hardens. They don't have a choice. Yanking a gleaming blade from its sheath with burning resolve, he declared, "This piece of steel right here, this is our winning lottery ticket." The older man's eyes go wide, instantly spotting the legendary King's Blade. He whispers its mythic origins, forged from a cosmic silver meteorite that crashed from the stars. Ransom clenches the hilt, feeling the crushing weight of a sacred oath settling on his shoulders. The old-timer swears that blood-sucking vampires and grotesque night terrors will literally disintegrate the second this holy metal. Locking her absolute faith onto him, she promises that if he ends up biting the dust, going down swinging side by side beats waving a white flag any day. Her hardcore, ride-or-die loyalty totally blindsides him. Catching his stunned look, she cracks a quick smirk, brushing it off as a dark joke to cut the tension. But the smile vanishes as she pivots back to the glaring tactical nightmare. They are still desperately flying blind on how to actually put Cyrus in the ground. Jaw clenched, Ransom makes the call. No matter how suicidal it gets, they have to sprint down the only bleeding path they have left. Meanwhile, the camera cuts to the peaceful Lara village, where clueless kids are soaking up the final fleeting seconds of their innocent everyday lives. A group of boys giggles wildly, tossing around the mushrooms they scavenged to see who scored the biggest loot. Pumping his little legs, one kid dashes ahead, totally pumped. The moment they reach home, their playful sprint comes to a dead halt. The mushroom slips from his trembling fingers, hitting the dirt as a roaring inferno consumes their entire village. In a heartbeat, childhood innocence is swallowed by pure, unadulterated. Rooted to the spot, the kids can only stare in sheer terror, their minds struggling to process the apocalyptic scene before them. Through the blazing heat, armored troops are mercilessly butchering the unarmed townsfolk. A fleeing man takes a brutal slash to the back, crumpling instantly. Nearby heavy wooden carts are already overflowing with mangled bodies. This isn't random violence. It is a highly coordinated slaughter. Heavily armed squads fan out across the blazing alleys, sealing off every possible escape route. Then, their cold eyes lock onto the children. Refusing to leave any loose ends, the executioners advance their blood-stained swords, raised, and panic grips the kids as the Grim Reaper closes in. But right before the fatal swing, a deadly projectile rips through the thick smoke. Wham! The piercing arrow shatters a soldier's iron helmet, killing him on. A second guard drops just as fast, a gaping hole in his armor. The lethal ambush neutralizes the immediate threat in a matter of eyes wide with shock, the little ones gasp, completely paralyzed by their miraculous rescue. Stepping out from the fiery shadows is a rugged marksman, dropping to one knee to carefully inspect them for injuries. Shaking like a leaf, one of the boys stammers out a question, asking for his savior's identity. The imposing man simply states his name, Rivera Pietro. Instantly, a spark of recognition hits the kids, quickly morphing into utter disbelief. This rough-looking stranger is none other than the legendary Baron. Cutting their awe short, Rivera firmly states that survival comes before story time. He swiftly rounds them up, commanding them to sprint toward the forest immediately. But one boy digs his heels into the dirt, sobbing uncontrollably. He screams that his mother is still trapped inside the blazing inferno. Rivera's jaw clenches. He knows picking off a handful of grunts won't halt this massive genocide. Staring at the crumbling ash, he curses the wicked count branding him an irredeemable monster. Meanwhile, the moon rises high over the Count's foreboding fortress. Deep within its cold stone walls, the horrific aftermath of the slaughter takes shape. Guards heave heavy wooden wagons inside each one, overflowing with blood-drenched corpses. Dozens of identical carts line the dimly lit courtyard, exposing the sickening scale of this human harvest. Thick tarps drape over the macabre cargo, making it glaringly obvious. These bodies aren't just casual. The morbid delivery chain moves like clockwork, completely undisturbed. Stepping forward, a loyal lieutenant reports their terrifying haul. Exactly 116 They have easily smashed the day's gruesome quota. Instead of being repulsed, the sinister Count chuckles in pure delight. With a wave of his hand, he orders declaring that he will personally take care of the final. Bowing deeply, the terrified servant scrambles out of the room. Finally isolated in the eerie silence, the tyrant steps forward and firmly plants his bare, foul, shadowy energy immediately pulses from the dead, surging straight into his veins as he greedily devours the life force of his victims. Smirking, he mutters that Ransom's crew is scheduled to breach the palace by tomorrow morning. He revels in the anticipation, practically tasting his imminent victory. But just as he pivots to leave, a faint metallic gleam flashes from deep within the morbid pile. Someone is hiding among the dead. Slowly, a blood-stained hand slides out from under, fingers wrapping tightly around the hilt of a hidden blade. For one breath-holding second, the arrogant tyrant suspects absolutely nothing. Hidden in the shadows, Ransom white-knuckles his grip, shifting his weight for the ultimate sneak attack. Without making a single sound, he slides the legendary key. A blinding blast of blue aura detonates outward as he launches himself into the air. The killing intent spikes so violently that the Count finally detects the threat. But it's almost hours ago the brilliant tactician Sia had orchestrated this very suicide mission. The moment she discovered the slaughtered villagers from Lar, she ordered Ransom to play dead. By burying himself beneath the victims, the enemy's own supply line would ferry him right into Cassius's private chambers. Swallowing his disgust, Ransom embraced the morbid Trojan horse strategy, regulating his breathing to blend perfectly with the corpses. Sia's golden rule had been clear erase every ounce of his mana signature, and attack only when the monster let his guard down. Now the explosive strike connects, but Cassius contorts his body at a sickening angle, barely dodging the fatal slice, before locking eyes with clashing blades. Ransom's heart sinks. He realizes instantly that a perfect stealth attack wasn't enough. Taking down this monster is going to be... Sparks fly as their weapons collide. Parrying a heavy strike, Cassius sneers at Ransom's fully regenerated limbs, sarcastically asking if the boys stumbled upon some... Shaking off the taunt, Ransom tosses his clever tactics out the window. If he wants to walk out alive, he has to crush this villain in raw, brutal combat. Across the room, Cassius flashes a demonic grin, practically spitting Ransom's name like venom. The Count erupts into a violent storm of blood-crimson energy, vowing to slowly drink in every ounce of the boy's absolute despair. Ransom aggressively bites back the urge to lash out, forcing his racing heartbeat into a deadly, icy calm. As azure light coils tightly around the king's blade, he feels the cold steel pulse alive, projecting its ancient will straight into his mind. Recalling his master's old teachings, he zeroes in, determined to sink his very soul with the weapon's beating heart. Digging his heels into the dirt, he throws absolutely everything into the clash. Cobalt and crimson shockwaves shatter the air as the two warriors hurl them. Caius goes through the initial parry, his blade blurring. He rips a gigantic, blood-red arc across the scarred earth, aiming to obliterate Ransom in a single devastating sweep. Refusing the bait, Ransom vaults high above the lethal wave. The crimson beam bulldozes into the terrain, detonating like a massive bomb, refusing to give the maniac an inch to breathe. But Caius instantly lunges back into the fray, bringing down a savage. Ransom catches the blow flawlessly. His form is razor-sharp, now utterly untroubled, and for the very first time today, the Count's arrogant smirk shatters into genuine wide-eyed shock. A concussive wave of pure blue blasts the pale aristocrat backward. Ransom doesn't hesitate, unleashing a blinding counterswing that finally Caius barely survives the execution by solidifying a thick crimson armor of aura right across his throat and chest. Spotting the near-lethal graze, Ransom immediately surges forward to finish the job, wiping the wound. Caius chuckles openly, confessing that a fraction less defense would have seen his head rolling in the dirt. Yet gazing death in the face only fuels his sick thrill. It's undeniable proof of Banroa's royal bloodline. smiling wickedly. He knows he is staring at the lost second prince of Manhwa, the ghost whose corpse vanished from the records. This truth transforms the boy into the ultimate mouth-watering sacrifice. He gloats that offering up such a phenomenally rare is exactly what he needs to unlock his deepest, darkest obsession. Ransom doesn't waste a single breath on small talk. Instead, he lets his steel do the talking, launching into another thunderous assault. The sapphire edge slams right into the monster's guard, packing enough kinetic fury to catapult the count across the battlefield. Yet, skidding backward, Caius merely cackles, taunting that these parlor tricks. He sneers that the prince could swing 1,000,000 times, and still, the white-haired demon proudly roars that absolute zero chance exists for some basic aura trick to shatter his ironclad. Ransom absorbs the insult, narrowing his gaze until a literal flame of pure blue fury ignites deep within his pupil. Their dual energies explode like colliding thunderstorms as Ransom closes the gap, violently dragging the arrogant count into it. The sheer magnitude of their impact detonates across. Miles away, bathed in moonlight, a quiet tavern balcony sits in eerie, oblivious silence above the distant chaos. Rivera lounges with his underground crew right up until the rhythmic quakes and flashing lights from the war zone finally bleed into their hideout. Confused, one of his lieutenants leans in, demanding to know why the boss dragged every single fighter out of bed tonight. He wagers that Rivera is gearing up to spark a full-blown revolution. But the rebel leader waves off the theory, insisting he isn't looking to start a war. He claims a little bird merely warned him that something completely unprecedented was going down. His crew immediately corners him, begging for the juicy details of this mysterious intel. But before a single word leaves his lips, a colossal, blinding flare of aura paralyzes him with raw terror. The entire gang violently flinches out of their seats as the concussive wave proves a catastrophic showdown is tearing up the neighborhood. Spotting the sky ripping itself apart in flashes of blue and red, the horrifying truth clicks. Count Caius is actually locked in mortal combat. The rebels instantly link this chaos to the boss's tip, utterly baffled as to who on earth has the guts to challenge the monster. Rivera tracks the distant carnage, completely dumbfounded by the sheer barking for his men to toss him the spyglass for a clear ID. He aggressively squints through the brass lens as the tension suffocates him. The magnified image completely drains the color from his face as the swordsman's features snap into focus. Trembling, he breathes out an impossible ghost's name. Rivera stammers aloud, mind blown, realizing that if that boy is truly alive, his crippled, broken body has somehow miraculous. A haunting memory rushes back. A fierce woman looking him dead in the eye, promising that this exact moment would. She had dared his very soul, demanding to know if he'd finally step up and pull the trigger, or spend the rest of his miserable life. Staring at the titanic clash, a sickening doubt chews at Rivera. He realizes that calling themselves a resistance is a joke they don't. The bitter truth hits hard. Against nightmarish freaks like Caius, their greatest victory was smuggling a handful of orphans out of the city, not winning an actual damn war. Snapping him back to reality, one of his brawlers aggressively demands to know if they are seriously just going to sit here and play spectator. Rivera finally makes the ultimate call to jump into the meat grinder. He mutters a heavy, breathless apology, both for his cowardly hesitation and for the suicidal mission he's about to drag his brothers into. Cutting back to the slaughterhouse, Ransom launches an explosive anti-air sapphire strike right at the tyrant's jaw. He smoothly spins his momentum into a deadly flow. Refusing to surrender the momentum, Ransom digs his heels in, desperate to shatter the stalemate. He risks it all for one final strike. A guttural snarl rips from the count as Ransom's glowing blade finally chews through the impenetrable armor guarding his throat. Muscles screaming, Ransom shoves forward, his mind just one tiny gap. That is all it takes. But the monster digs in, violently repelling the strike with earth-shattering force. Unwilling to back down, Ransom forces another deadly clash, hoping sheer willpower can rewrite destiny. Suddenly, the arrogant smirk vanishes from the Count's face. The absolute defense around his windpipe crumbles. A vivid crimson thread blooms across his pale skin, undeniable proof that he is not invincible. The vampire lord brushes a trembling finger against the cut, utterly bewildered. How could a mere mortal scratch him? Shock violently morphs into pure, humiliated wrath. Spitting curses, the Count erupts a terrifying wave of blood-red aura exploding around him. Chest heaving, a fierce grin stretches across Ransom's face. He finally cracked the code to kill this beast. The skeletal remains of the castle cast long, jagged shadows over the war zone, framing a duel that is rapidly becoming legendary. Yet instead of lashing out in blind panic, the Count chuckles. He applauds the swordsman's technique with a bone-chilling, twisted delight. Ransom refuses to take keeping his eyes locked on the predator in dead silence. The aristocrat sneers, admitting that glowing sword might actually behead him one day, if the boy can even make it back within striking distance. With a flick of his wrist, the real nightmare begins. A writhing horde of bloodthirsty thralls materializes out of the shadows, swarming between them. The monsters stampede toward Ransom, instantly transforming an honorable duel into a brutal meat grind. Breathing heavy, Ransom plants his boots. He hoists his brilliant azure blade high to meet the tidal wave of flesh. A massive, sweeping arc of energy obliterates the front line, launching mangled bodies into the air. But mid-swing, he grinds his teeth. That coward, forcing him to burn precious stamina on mindless pawns. And the nightmare does not stop. Monstrous reinforcement, an endless ocean of fangs and claws. He masks his rising panic with an icy stare, but his trembling muscles betray the toll it is taking. The math is simple. If he keeps swinging, his lungs will give out long before he ever reaches Gius again. A snarling fiend catapults through the air, wielding a blade dripping with toxic blood magic. Ransom violently twists away, barely dodging the lethal, but the suffocating circle of enemies crushes closer. He has to butcher this mob right now, or the Count will slaughter him the second his knees buckle. From his blind spot, another horror raises a massive axe for the executioner's strike. The hairs on Ransom's neck stand up, but his exhausted body reacts. Boom! A streak of blinding golden light shreds through the heavy air. The brilliant arrow detonates right through the skull of the ambusher, bailing Ransom out inches from death. As the headless corpse slumps to the gravel, Ransom whips his head toward the trajectory. The undead horde freezes, completely paralyzed, a pure silver shaft, radiating lethal, holy energy. A massive wave of relief washes over the swordsman. The cavalry is here. Rivera Pietro steps out of the dissipating smoke, his elegant bow drawn tight, making one hell of an entrance that leaves everyone completely speechless. Right on his heels drops Salzern, flashing a cocky grin, and yelling that they were not about to miss the party. Ransom blinks, completely dumbfounded to see the guy standing there. Then comes Seiya, confidently marching onto the blood-soaked soil. Daisy kicks open a path right beside them, weapons drawn, and eyes practically glowing with battle lust. Even Seiklin steps into the fray. Ransom never saw coming in a million years. With a deafening war cry, the rebel squad charges headlong, absolutely ecstatic that every single monster they ever wanted to murder is conveniently packed into one courtyard, raining a relentless barrage of luminous sniper shots into the mob. Seiya thrusts her hands forward, channeling a massive surge of empowering. Her buff turns the tide instantly, letting the rebels brutally dismantle another screeching fiend in perfect sync. Daisy and Seiklin splinter off eagerly, locking blades with them, proving this entire squad came here hungry for a bloodbath. But Ransom immediately yells at them, completely furious that they threw themselves in. Daisy instantly snaps back, tearing into him for always trying to play the lone tragic hero. They are not defenseless kids anymore. She fiercely declares that they ride together, and if they die together. Salzern violently cleaves a vampire in half to emphasize her point. He barks at Ransom to shut up, ignore the small fry, and keep his eyes locked on the final boss. That absolute unshakable trust hits Ransom like a freight train. He takes a deep breath, finally letting go of his suffocating need. They are warriors now. A fresh fire ignites in his chest as his fingers crush around the hilt of his sword. His eyes turn to absolute ice, fully embracing his role as the tip of the spear. 50 yards away, the Count is waiting. Drowning in a suffocating tornado of crimson aura, the vampire lord prepares to rip the boy apart with his bare hands. Seiya stomps her boots into the earth, anchoring an unbreakable defense. Slowly, deliberately, Ransom shifts his glowing blade into an executioner's stance. He tunes out the shrieks of the dying horde, completely trusting his squad to handle the trash, while he locks in on the god-tier threat. A psychotic ear-to-ear grin stretches across the Count's pale face. He is absolutely euphoric at the prospect. With a sickening crunch of bone and muscle, the aristocrat's arm explodes into a grotesque, razor-sharp pincer, promising to amputate Ransom's sword arm first. The massive mutation whipped an unstoppable predatory lunge. But instead of jumping back, Ransom charges straight into the jaws of death, violently crashing his azure blade directly into. His fingers quickly snatch the hidden pendant concealed beneath his shirt. A blinding golden warding circle suddenly erupts, directly blocking the Lord's incoming strike. The abrupt barrier catches the noble completely off guard. The sheer kinetic force as the thick smoke finally dissipates, his monstrously mutated arm is utterly gone, obliterated down to a charred, smoking stump. Totally baffled by this sudden reversal, he violently snarls. Ransom simply dangles the shattered protective talisman in the air, brutally mocking the arrogant lord for missing such a crucial detail. He casually explains it was an ancient relic, scavenged from the ruins saved. The fragile gem crumbles into sparkling dust, but Ransom just smirks. It did its job flawlessly. With a heavy, sickening thud, the Lord's severed grotesque claw slams into the dirt between them. Ransom's eyes lock onto his target. That explosive clash just handed him the perfect split-second opening he craved. It is time. He finally unleashes the ultimate trump card he has been keeping in his back pocket. An oceanic surge of azure energy engulfs his blade. Ransom slips into absolute focus, perfectly syncing his heartbeat with the weapon. He lashes out. This strike possesses a horrifying degree of precision and raw, unadulterated power. The attack violently erupts into a colossal sapphire cyclone, devouring the entire arena. Bleeding and enraged, the Count screams a vow of vengeance against Zeus. Despite the crushing storm, he forcefully hurls a desperate crimson countersurge, but the azure tempest effortlessly shreds right through the blood-red energy, swallowing it whole. The raging cyclone grinds relentlessly forward. It brutally strips away. The true terror finally flashes across the noble's face. The punishing barrage violently cracks open the protective aura, shielding his exposed throat. Without missing a beat, Ransom forcefully rams his executioner's strike straight into that millimeter of weakness. A titanic blue phantom blade pierces entirely through the Lord. Panic sets in. The soul-forged impact violently detonates outward, ripping through his ribs in a blinding, catastrophic flash. Ransom fluidly follows through with the swing. As cold and utterly merciless, the fatal blow connects. The desolate city quietly swallows the lingering echoes of the clash, as the magical hurricane slowly dissolves under the pale moonlight. Ransom stands completely motionless, silently watching the ruined vampire lord. The noble's decapitated head hits the rubble with a sickening thud. The nightmare is finally over. Yet even fading into oblivion, the dying monster fixates entirely on the terrifying force that just... With his final raspy breath, he stares in absolute disbelief. Ransom casually shrugs it off. He simply tried merging ancient sword chi with standard aura. Nothing more. The severed head shudders in horror. That lethal fusion is the undeniable hallmark of a true grandmaster. The Count dies utterly terrified of the monster Ransom. A heavy, breathless silence washes over the ruined courtyard, letting a few feet away, a surviving bloodsucker violently seizes, hacking up pools of pitch-black blood. The master's demise is forcefully tearing through his thralls. Ransom's weary allies quickly notice the surrounding undead, screeching and dropping like flies all over the wasteland. The surviving rebels are completely dumbfounded by the sudden collapse, but Rivera's eyes widen. He grasps the sheer impossibility of what just occurred. He slowly whips his head toward the swordsman. Staring at the convulsing horde, Rivera connects the dots. This absolute madman actually butchered Krugus. Still thoroughly mind-blown, he shakily calls out to the lone victor. Rivera quickly jogs over, desperately confirming that this miracle is no illusion. He eagerly points out ancient lore. Vampires completely lose their minds for a day or two when their sire gets slaughtered. Ransom casually asks if the freaks eventually bounce back. The rebel leader enthusiastically requests permission to wipe the floor with the remaining leeches before the sun sets. Ransom scoffs at the formality. He bluntly tells the man to drop the submissive act. They should be demanding his assistance instead. Rivera swallows hard. He deeply bows his head. His voice, a quiet, surprisingly warm smile, tugs at the corner of Ransom's lips. He completely shatters the hierarchy, offering a true brotherhood. He casually taps Rivera's shoulder, trusting him to help. The rebel is totally caught off guard by the humble respect. Swallowing his shock, he immediately pivots, deciding right then and there to spill a massive hidden secret instead of holding back. Rivera pulls out the weathered crest of House Pietro, revealing that 3 centuries ago, his bloodline ranked among Gloria Lynn's elite. He urges Ransom to take the heirloom. Ransom just stares at the gleaming metal, totally caught off guard. Dropping to one knee, Rivera pledges his absolute loyalty, swearing to serve Ransom as his ultimate master. All around them, the shattered city smolders, setting the stage for a brand new empire to rise from the ashes. Saya deadpans that she totally saw this coming, half expecting the guy to cough up his face. Strolling away from the wreckage, Ransom shoots her a look and asks exactly how deep her history with Rivera goes. She shrugs, casually dropping that she fed him intel on the side. Ransom stops dead in his tracks, suddenly grasping just how many secrets his own squad is hiding. He brushes it off as no big deal. Rolling her eyes, she dumps the cleanup duty on Rivera, so the two of them can pivot back to their main. Her strategy: drag the Count's filthy secrets into the light, sparking a massive public uprising to back their cause. Ransom nods, his mind already calculating the endgame. With Crucius out of the picture, whoever wins the crowd wins the throne. Locking down Kushan boils down to one simple thing: winning over the locals. To pull that off, they mobilize a makeshift task force of merchants and everyday civilians to hunt down undeniable proof of the Count's twisted crimes. The breadcrumbs drag them straight to a shady, cult-affiliated chapel. They creep up to the doors, praying for a lucky break. Slipping inside their guard is fully up hunting for dark conspiracies rather than divine salvation. Looming at the altar is a creepy horned gargoyle, staring down at a totally deserted hall. At a glance, it's basically a whole lot of nothing, but that dead silence screams a trap. Ransom cracks a nervous joke, using sarcasm to mask his spiking heart rate. Before he can call it a bust, Saya locks onto something completely out of place. Out of nowhere, a blinding flash of familiar emerald light engulfs Ransom, completely throwing him off balance. The pulse originates from his own pocket, feeding off the chapel's twisted aura. Yanking it out, he stares at his pendant, vibrating and glowing like the ancient relic spins wildly, pulsing with neon green magic as it locks onto a hidden frequency in the room. Trusting the radar, he rips open a crackling blue spatial rift to see what's causing the interference. His hand closes around a violently glowing tome, and a chill runs down his spine. He's felt this exact sinister energy before. Saya instantly clocks it as the legendary Book of Fate, and demands he Ransom hard passes. Triggering that thing could hurl him straight back through the timeline, leaving their fragile territory totally defenseless. Weighing the catastrophic risks, they agree to shove the artifact back into the vault before all hell breaks loose. He shoves the glowing book toward the rift, desperate to shut down the threat before it hits the point of no return. But the cursed thing snaps open on its own, completely overpowering his grip. The ancient pages blur, landing on a specific date alongside a chilling message: the master has returned. Fresh off looting the cult's stash, Ransom freezes in sheer panic, realizing the prophecy isn't just a warning, it is dragging him right into the middle of it. Suddenly, a second relic bearing a star-shaped crest manifests in the energy storm, kicking off another twisted game of destiny. A tidal wave of sapphire magic explodes violently, sucking him into a temporal vortex. When the blinding flash finally fades, the chapel is gone, replaced by glaring sunlight and endless open skies. A cold dread washes over him. The book actually hijacked him back in time again. Fighting off the intense motion sickness, his brain scrambles to lock down his current era and location. Peering through the glare, he realizes he is bouncing along inside a rickety wooden wagon. Worse, he is crammed shoulder to shoulder with a squad of heavily cloaked figures. One wrong twitch and his cover is blown. But before he can even map out an escape plan, a suffocating heavyweight aura crushes the air right out of his lungs. An elderly man huddled in a cloak is leaking such monstrous spiritual pressure that even a seasoned time traveler like Ransom, without even lifting his head, the old man casually drops his name, acting like he had been waiting for him to wake up all along. Ransom's survival instincts scream at max volume. This guy's power level absolutely eclipses the cult boss he just slaughtered. Muscle memory twitches his hand, hovering dangerously close to his hilt, but he forces his fingers to freeze. Drawing steel against a monster like this is instant suicide. Because the terrifying truth isn't just the man's physical strength, it is the unnatural gravity of his presence. Every single drop of mana in the atmosphere is literally bowing to the old man's will. An anomaly so mind-bending, it defies the logic of even a seasoned Grand Master. The old warrior throws back his hood. He isn't hiding in the shadows anymore. He's putting his raw, intimidating authority on full display. He drops his title like an anvil, Grand Duke Retina. Chelsea, and casually claims he bumped into the kid by sheer luck, scooping him up as an apprentice. The traveler's brain completely short-circuits. He realizes this twisted timeline actually expects him to play the role of the Duke's student. Just as the old man seems to second-guess his own memory, a loyal vassal chimes in, confirming he took the boy under his wing exactly 7 days ago. The Duke nods the fabricated memory, and from that second on, he treats this bizarre master-student dynamic. He mutters that this entire setup feels eerily destined, like some grand divine design. Our time hopper is completely stunned. Unlike those groveling cultists, this Duke doesn't bow, and he sure as hell isn't terrified of it. Instead, the Duke draws a line in the sand, declaring himself the ultimate enemy of those fanatics. Wiping them off the face of the earth isn't just a job. It's his blood-sworn duty. He officially dubs the boy Ransom Manhwa, cementing the lie that their mentorship began exactly 1 week prior. The old master explains they are currently barreling toward his personal strong, where Ransom's intense martial instruction will officially kick off. A chill crawls up the traveler's spine. The man keeps reciting a fake past, like he's reading a script for a life Ransom never even lived. Yet the Duke's eyes burn with genuine hope, speaking as if their shared destiny carries the weight of the world. This warm sincerity only spikes Ransom's paranoia. Does this powerhouse actually see right through his disguise? Totally lost, he sits there, muscles coiled in tense confusion. He figures the Duke definitely senses he's an anomaly, yet actively chooses to shower him with warmth anyway. And honestly, that just makes the whole puzzle tense. Deciding to test the waters, he plays along, bowing his head respectfully, and calling the powerhouse Master. Then he shoots straight from the hip. Is the Duke seriously okay with taking in a total wild card without knowing his true origins? The Duke chuckles, admitting that this blind faith feels wildly out of character, which is exactly why it matters so much. He states the only thing he knows for sure right now, the pieces are perfectly aligning with a lifelong mission he's carried in his heart. Because of that gut feeling, he suspects their crossing paths is the cosmic result of some ancient, forgotten pact. Pushed for hard facts, the old warrior just shrugs it off as a fighter's pure intuition, rather than hard logic. Ransom is left completely speechless. How can such an absolute monster of a man run on vague vibes? But then the Duke drops a steadying hand onto his shoulder, anchoring him right through the chaotic uncertainty. Ransom stares up at the sprawling sky, totally overwhelmed by how insanely fate keeps flipping his life upside down. At long last, their carriage rumbles through the massive iron gates of the Duke's territory. The horses pull to a slow halt. The ride is over. And now our time-traveling rogue has no choice but to step up and play. He steps foot into glowing steel, a breathtaking fortress city, practically built out of pure martial glory. Riding through the bustling streets, reality finally sinks in. He has been dragged straight into the heart of the Grandmaster's world. The old man proudly gestures to glowing steel, calling it the City of Knights and his personal sanctuary. Even with a flashy title like Grand, he tosses the boring politics to his trusted vassals, dedicating his blood and sweat purely to forging the next generation of warriors. Throughout the journey, he quietly drills Ransom on the strict etiquette and street smarts needed to survive this brutal, old-school era. Thanks to those survival tips, the modern traveler slowly starts blending into the local culture without blowing his. With zero clues on how to jump back to his own timeline, he bites the bullet, resolving to survive and thrive in the here and now. Plus, he knows this era's tech and blade work completely outclass his own skills, so he needs to devour every lesson he can get. The Duke then drops a bombshell. There's another apprentice waiting back at the fortress. He paints her as fiercely driven and aggressively righteous, basically warning Ransom that their first clash won't be pretty. As the gargantuan castle looms over the skyline, it drives home exactly how much power he's just walked into. Inside the halls, he suddenly locks eyes with a fierce blonde swordswoman, and her jaw practically hits the floor. The shock on both their faces makes it painfully obvious they've crossed paths before, in a totally different life. The Grandmaster instantly picks up on the heavy tension, raising an eyebrow and asking if the two have a history. She nods, confirming this is the exact same mysterious guy who backed her up at the fanatical cult's chapel a solid year ago. The Duke strokes his beard, recalling her old report about a rogue using a freakishly bizarre sword aura. Thrilled by this twist of fate, he commands her to mentor the fresh rookie. The master points out that while he officially took the kid under his wings, his brutal schedule leaves zero time for one-on-one training, dumping the heavy lifting squarely onto her shoulders. She instantly slumps, clearly crushed by the unexpected workload. Meanwhile, the Wanderer steels himself, dreading the reality of this punishing noose. The Grand Duke strides off to consult with the spellcasters, stranding the two apprentices in complete silence. The Wanderer's mind spins. He absolutely cannot fathom how He is utterly floored. Not only is she the Duke's apprentice, but she is also calling the shots as his direct superior. Hoping to break the icy tension, he tosses out a breezy, laid-back greeting, but she shoots down his friendly vibe in a heartbeat. She snags him by the collar, before things get too cozy, ruthlessly locking down the conversation with iron-fisted authority. She barks at him to show absolute respect to his elders. He silently groans, thoroughly convinced she is already milking her newfound power. She snaps back that from this second forward, they are the living shadows of their master. His dusty past means absolutely nothing, only raw discipline survives. When she sharply demands if they are crystal clear, he grudgingly chokes down his pride and nods. She hammers down the golden rule: every single breath must be calculated to shield their lord's flawless reputation. Her brutal critique kicks off with his grooming and posture, making him instantly cringe at her suffocating strictness. Pacing around him like a ruthless drill sergeant, she immediately trashes his. Then she rips into his grimy, wrinkled gear, before utterly roasting his wild, tangled bedhead, holding it up as the ultimate proof of his lazy attitude. To her, he looks exactly like a cheap street thug, not the chosen pupil of a Grand Duke. Catching his lingering gaze, she defensively snaps, demanding why he keeps staring at her own head. He deadpans that her chaotic bird's nest of a hairstyle has zero right to judge anybody. Mortified, her hand shoots up to feel the messy disaster. The second she realizes he nailed it, her face burns bright red with sheer defensive frustration. He secretly figures out the truth: she is desperately faking this icy, flawless persona for her new rookie, completely masking her clumsy reality. Instead of pushing his luck, he lets the awkward silence fade with a quiet, knowing smirk. Clearing her throat, she officially introduces herself as Aiden Serum. She proudly drops the fact that she serves as a heavy hitter in the Duke's elite vanguard, the Horizon Knights. Aiden bluntly confesses that when it comes to pure raw muscle, he probably crushes her. However, she quickly adds their master's harsh critique: the boy absolutely cannot spark or control true sword ki yet. To fix that fatal flaw, she preaches that she orders him to unsheath his steel, opting to beat. It finally hits him, dragging him down to the dirt arena, was her master plan from the start. She swears up and down this brawl is not petty payback for the hair joke, though her venomous tone screams the exact opposite. He embraces the bloody challenge without hesitation, knowing deep down that talking is just a waste of breath. Only the language of steel matters now. As they circle each other like wolves, she lectures that human bodies cannot simply dominate raw mana. Instead, fighters must channel the pure intent of the blade's very soul. And that spirit, she warns, harbors only one dark desire. Its only obsession is to slice through flesh. She proves her point by launching a devastating, lightning-fast strike. Catching the murderer, refusing to back down an inch, he explodes forward and meets her charge head-on, twisting a simple lesson into a lethal, high-stakes duel. Sparks fly as their weapons violently slam together in a blistering flurry, proving his physical stats are totally off the charts. Relentlessly driving him back, she shouts that mana merely rallies around the weapon's raging thirst for blood. His knuckles go white on the hilt, desperately trying to decode her crazy theory through the heavy vibrations of the metal. This bizarre concept breaks everything he thought he knew, yet he feels it in his gut. This is the ultimate cheat code to mastering this world's lethal combat. Their blades violently spring apart, buying him a frantic heartbeat to digest the explosive revelation. Aiden freely admits that a body built to channel raw mana is a massive unfair advantage, but she firmly shoots back that flawless technique will always be the bedrock of a true magic only fuels the fire that pure skill ignites. Without that rock-solid base, she warns his flashy power will crumble like a cheap paper castle in a hurricane. Pointing her tip at his chest, she dares him to go another round. But this time, he better force out. He shuts his eyes tight, blocking out the world around him. Instead of wrestling with the weapon, he tunes in, waiting for the steel to speak. His knuckles turn white around the grip, desperately hunting for that hidden. Finally, a spark ignites. That invisible barrier shatters, and he knows he's cracked the code. Aiden watches him like a hawk. The sudden shift in his posture, the fierce focus in his eyes, definitely grabs her attention. A subtle smirk tugs at her lips. For the first time but she's not letting him off that easy. She pivots toward the armory rack, ready to flip the script, and see if this breakthrough is actually legit. She tosses him a standard rusted practice sword. Try pulling that off with this, she challenges. He catches the dull iron and squares his shoulders. The legendary safety net is gone. It's just him and a hunk of basic metal now. Nothing. The steel is completely dead in his hands, and that magical bond. He grits his teeth, totally baffled. Why the hell is the flow suddenly jammed? Aiden just shakes her head, totally unfazed. Right on schedule, she points out, entirely expecting him to crash. She breaks it down for him. Sword aura isn't just magic. It's the physical explosion of the weapon's own inner spirit, bleeding into the real world. Top-tier gear packs a massive soul. That insanely overpowered relic he was holding literally did all the heavy lifting for him. Stripping away all the flashy illusions, she ruthlessly grades his actual skill. He's barely scraping the bottom of the beginner tier. To conquer this basic stage, he has to actually read the iron, feel its heartbeat, and let the weapon guide his hand. So forget the earth-shattering explosions. His real mission is clawing out pure aura from absolute garbage tier scrap. He squeezes the cheap hilt, swallowing his pride. The bitter truth hits hard. He still has an absolute mountain to climb. But there's no time for a pity party. He vows to grind through the darkness. As heavy shadows swallow the grand fortress, the emotional roller coaster of the day morphs into a brutal, sweaty reality. Under the cold moonlight, the courtyard turns into a strictly guarded arena, where he collapses flat on the stone, his lungs burning. As he pays the Lanson is completely wiped out, practically melting into the training hall floor, when Aiden's sharp voice slices through the air. He blinks up at the ceiling, his chest violently heaving. As he tries, she towers over his bruised body, snapping at him for playing dead in the middle of a sacred dojo. She drills it into his skull. He is carrying their master's legendary legacy. Slacking off like a bum is spitting on that honored title. Then her eyes lock onto his sweat-stained, ruined outfit from yesterday. With a tired smirk, he casually drops the bomb he hasn't. Ignoring the brutal fatigue, Lanson slowly hefts his blade, locking back into a combat stance. His eyes narrow with lethal precision. He throws his entire soul into the motion, raw mana crackling and swirling around the cheap metal as he bends the energy. He rips through the air. A vicious, flawless arc of light explodes outward, finally harnessing that wild power he fumbled with yesterday. Aiden actually flinches. Her eyes widen in pure shock at the. She aggressively grills him, demanding to know how he cracked the impossible in 12 hours. Her mind is totally blown. A leap like that defies logic. Even once-in-a-generation freaks need months to nail that trick. Still, she swallows her pride and hands him a rare compliment, deciding it's time to crank the dial straight up to expert mode. Lanson flashes a cocky grin, his swagger fully reloaded, as he welcomes the brutal challenge. The practice session instantly erupts into a high-speed, lethal clash of steel. Aiden charges straight into the danger zone. Her blazing golden wave violently collides. Instead of backing off, Lanson lunges right into her personal space, suffocating her, reach and forcing a brutal, close quarter. She barely deflects a lethal blow, just millimeters from her face. A cold sweat drops. This kid has turned into a total monster overnight. He unleashes a relentless water-fluid barrage of slashes. A heavy, bone-rattling smash sends her skidding backward, her heels desperately scraping the dirt to stay upright. The spectating students are absolutely paralyzed with shock. The rookie isn't just surviving. He's aggressively bullying the veteran instructor across the yard. Pushed straight to the brink, the crowd gasps as Aiden's aura violently shifts. She's finally triggering the lethal state of sword intent. She digs her boots into the earth and blasts forward like a cannonball, shattering the ground beneath her. Launching into the air, she brings down a devastating. Lanson freezes, completely blindsided by the impossible blinding blur of her sudden acceleration, closing the gap in a heartbeat. Aiden's shimmering steel abruptly halts. Just visibly shaken, he demands to know how her speed exploded out of nowhere. The two break apart, lowering their blades, as the brutal clash pivots into a masterclass. Aiden drops the truth bomb. What he just witnessed is the terrifying peak of a high-tier sword expert, a mythical zone called Sword Trust, where the cold steel practically. She describes it as an absolute realm, where the lethal blow lands before the brain can even form a single thought. But playtime is over. She reminds him that the massive exchange tournament kicks off in exactly 2 weeks, and he will have to cross blades with another direct disciple. As the personal pick of Grand Duke Retina, a massive target is painted on Lanson Van Roa's back. every single eye in that arena will be locked onto him. Because of that crushing pressure, she demands he shatter his limits and ascend at least one more tier. Instead of sweating bullets, Lanson absorbs the grim warning with a chillingly calm cure. He actually smirks openly, confessing that the insane challenge is thrilled by his sheer audacity. Aiden flashes a fiercely competitive grin right back. But their spark of rivalry is completely shattered. Heavy footsteps approach, and Aiden's face instantly twists into pure disgust. A venomous voice cuts through the courtyard. The stranger stepping out from the shadows is none other than Cassagier Chelsea. He shamelessly scoffs, spitting that their revered master dragged his own name through the mud by adopting total garbage. But he does not stop there. He crosses the ultimate line. He claims that if the Archduke's judgment is this pathetic, then Cassagier himself should have been crowned the head of the family. Aiden glares daggers at him. She coldly warns him to watch his filthy mouth and fix his attitude with an entire crowd watching. Cassagier just laughs off the threat. He mercilessly taunts her, asking if her shiny new title as heir somehow makes her think. He drags her painful past into the dirt, reminding everyone she was just a filthy street rat begging to be saved. He sneers that despite all the she has barely crawled her way up to a high expert level. And the new kid? Even worse. He brushes Lanson off as a downright miserable low-tier amateur. Changing targets, he arrogantly demands to inspect the heretic's treasure their master supposedly stole. Aiden instantly shoots him down, stating that a lethal artifact is not some cheap toy. That flat rejection makes Cassagier absolutely erupt. He takes the denial as a brutal slap to his massive ego, and immediately starts thrashing the Archduke's name all over again. Suddenly, Lanson's calm voice slices through the tension. Calling him a fellow disciple, he casually steps up and issues a bone. He dares Cassagier to draw his blade right now, and personally test if their master's judgment was a mistake. Cassagier actually stumbles back. He is completely blown away that the Lanson does not let up. He fiercely drives the point home. If his sword skills are really that pathetic, then completely obliterating him in a duel would only prove Cassagier's vicious claims right. Panic flashes across Aiden's face. She desperately tries to grab Lanson, totally horrified at how recklessly he is pouring gasoline on them. Trying to save face, Cassagier awkwardly laughs off the brutal challenge. He fakes a yawn, pretending that fighting a brat is totally beneath a man of his. Lanson just shrugs. The solution is dead simple. He tells Cassagier to shut the entire courtyard up by crushing him with that god-tier skill he will not stop bragging about. That savage, unfiltered call-out sends ripples of amusement through the crowd, while Cassagier's face turns a dangerous shade of red. The surrounding disciples are literally biting their lips to keep from laughing at the brilliant counterattack. With his pride completely shredded, Cassagier violently accepts the duel, spitting that Lanson is nothing but a... He furiously storms away, tossing back a dark promise that Lanson's cocky little attitude is about to get permanently erased. The second he is out of sight, Aiden covers her mouth in absolute shock. Grabbing him, she urgently warns Lanson that Cassagier is a petty, ruthless snake who will definitely play dirty at the upcoming tournament. Unbothered Lanson just glances around and playfully asks if the peanut gallery is finally done laughing. Flushed with deep embarrassment, Aiden awkwardly mumbles an apology, admitting she totally misjudged his nerve before. But Lanson just waves her off casually, stating that no matter, they are going to absolutely crush him. That unbreakable, stone-cold confidence leaves Aiden completely speechless. Snapping back to reality, she quickly clears her throat and barks out an order to get right back to the brutal grind. Hours later, the chaotic day fades into a dead silent, star-studded night blanketing the massive estate. Driven by an insane hunger for power, Lanson prowls the dimly lit grounds for a midnight workout. Suddenly, he spots Aiden resting in the cool air, and softly calls out to her. She glances over her shoulder, asking if the crazy rookie is seriously out here to burn more midnight oil. Rubbing the back of his neck, he awkwardly confesses, before noticing that she isn't meditating or training. She is just quietly staring up at... Panic spikes in Lanson's chest. Offering to sit beside her, he suddenly freezes, terrified that he just acted way too buddy-buddy with his strict senior. He stammers for a second, hesitantly asking if she is about to chew him out for dropping the respectful titles. Aiden waves off his concern, pointing out they are completely alone. She admits her debt to him runs way too deep to start sweating his lack of... The tension bleeds from his shoulders at her response, though Aiden keeps her rigid, unreadable facade. Dropping the tough act for a second, she looks him in the eye, offering genuine gratitude for pulling her and the kid. Eager to break the heavy atmosphere, Lanson flashes a smirk. He teases that if she is really that thankful, she ought to start calling him sir. After all, he is the older hero here. As the silence settles, their gaze drifts upward, and Aiden breaks the quiet by revealing her deep fascination with the 13 patron stars. Most constellations wander the heavens, she explains, but those 13 anchors stay permanently locked in place, earning the names of ancient guardian gods. Intrigued, Lanson tilts his head, asking why those specific celestial bodies hold such a tight grip on her, tracing a finger toward Minerva, the beacon of wisdom. She whispers that this exact spot is magical. It is the one place where that star aligns perfectly, dead center. Her voice drops to a vulnerable murmur. Growing up, she felt utterly adrift, like a stray ghost, but the second she locked eyes with that unwavering light, a profound anchor caught her soul. She finally knew exactly where she was supposed to stand. That unshakable feeling of homecoming is the exact reason she still spends hours gazing. Suddenly realizing how much she just spilled, she clears her throat quickly, excusing herself to prep a massive lecture for the upcoming exchange tournament. Lanson chuckles, throwing a playful jab that she is only making a run for it because her cheeks are burning from all that emotional honesty. Dawn cracks over the sprawling academy grounds. Draped in crisp ceremonial disciple robes, the duo strides down the echoing corridors toward the main arena. Right before the colossal double doors, Aiden shoots him a questioning glance. Is he ready for the madness? Lanson just offers a lethal ice-cold grin. He has been starving for this. The heavy oak doors groan open, unleashing a deafening tidal wave of roaring cheers and restless chat. Stepping into the Colosseum, thousands of hungry eyes instantly snap away from the pit and lock directly onto the pair. Even Lanson blinks in surprise. The sheer mass of bodies packing the grandstands is absolutely staggering. Toxic whispers ripple through the bleachers. Haters claim his spot as the Archduke's personal protege is pure nepotism, while others practice the venom in the air is thick enough to cut with a knife. He instantly registers that half this arena is praying for his public downfall. He gets it. Hundreds of desperate students would have killed for that elite position, and their bitter jealousy is completely aimed at him. A booming instructor's voice echoes through the stadium. The fighting pit clears out in seconds, and the roaring announcer calls the very first matchup down to the dirt. Lanson strides into the dead center of the ring. Totally isolated, he stands tall, radiating absolute zero. The bell rings. Without wasting a breath, the first challenger rockets forward like a rabid dog. It is a battle-hardened senior sporting nasty scars. The veteran sneers, spitting that it makes zero sense why a living legend like the Archduke would pick a scrub like him. He boldly swears to snatch that golden title by brutally crushing Lanson right here in the dirt. Lanson just stares, his face shifting into a terrifyingly blank mask. Flashing a wicked grin, the senior is dead set on exposing this so-called prodigy as a ghost of a smirk dances on Lanson's lips, soaking in the disrespect. He casually beckons the guy forward, telling him to make his move whenever he is ready. The clash ignites, but before the veteran can even plant his feet, Lanson detonates off the ground like a cannonball. Steel violently smashes against steel, yet Lanson's brutal swing packs an apocalyptic weight. Panic floods the opponent's eyes. He is absolutely paralyzed by the freakish, monstrous energies. Flipping his grip in a heartbeat, Lanson effortlessly manipulates the kinetic momentum with terrifying surgical precision. A cold dread sinks into the veteran's stomach. He realizes a split second too late. Lanson utterly steamrolls through his defense, delivering a devastating, flawless strike that terminates the fight, and the sheer blunt force impact causes the older disciple's weapon to... He just gapes at the ruined metal in his trembling hands, his brain totally short-circuiting over how fast he was demolished. Not shedding a single drop of sweat, Lanson fluidly hoists his weapon back up, his eyes already locked onto the stands for his next victim. The loser stands totally petrified, realizing just how razor-close, treating the victory like a foregone conclusion. A stunning ribbon of azure energy bleeds from his blade as he slides smoothly back into his fighting stance. The lingering shock waves of that insane kinetic burst still faintly vibrate through. Utterly humiliated and totally disarmed, the loudmouth senior, watching from the sidelines, Aiden is completely speechless at the absolute massacre. Beside her, Cassian's jaw practically hits the floor. The same kid they just laughed at absolutely obliterates a veteran disciple in the blink of an eye. Before the dust even settles, Lanson's icy voice cuts through the shock. Next, the shattered senior stays slumped on his knees. Lanson just turns his back, treating the total domination like a light warm-up. Watching from the sidelines, Aiden can hardly process it. The boy clawed his way from bottom-tier rookie to promotion-ready, but even she didn't see this freakish level of evolution coming. Gazing at him, towering over a battered upperclassman, it hits her. His explosive progress has completely shattered every single limit she placed on him. Her eyes widen as she spots his new trick. He is seamlessly weaving raw mana right into his sword key, forging a lethally unpredictable combat style. "I said next," Lanson demands, his tone deadly flat. A blinding afternoon sun beats down on the arena, but the surrounding crowd is practically suffocating in a heavy, terrified. Finally, another student breaks ranks. His blade hums with light, but Lanson just stands there, a pitch-black aura slithering around his own steel like a venomous snake. The fresh challenger lunges, bringing his weapon down in a brutal, skull-crushing arc. Lanson doesn't even flinch. He parries the heavy blow with surgical precision, immediately spotting the fatal blind spot. With a flick of his wrist, he unleashes a vicious crescent of blue energy, blasting the attack. He barely glances at the groaning student. Next, the remaining fighters freeze in their tracks. Their jaws hit the floor, as Lanson casually shreds through a desperate thrust, barking for the next victim, before his sword even finishes its swing. Pivoting on his heel, he buries a brutal front kick into a new challenger's gut, folding the guy in half before he can even blink. Another body hits the dirt. Lanson glares down at the groaning mess at his feet. Whispers ripple through the bleachers. The audience starts tallying his solo body count, realizing they aren't watching a student, they are watching a total monster. Up in the stands, Kasugai's blood boils. Watching his entire faction get publicly humiliated is too much. His jaw clenches and he shifts his weight. Out of the corner of his eye, Lanson catches the subtle twitch. Unfazed, he stares right back, silently questioning if this pathetic lineup was the absolute best the senior instructor could throw at him. So much for a grueling gauntlet. This whole setup was an absolute joke. But then, the final challenger creeps into the dirt. A remarkably short figure, face completely hidden under a dark hood. The mysterious kid stammers out a shaky battle cry, gripping a... Lanson drops into his stance. His weapon pulses with that same shadowy force, fully prepared to end this farce in one hit. The hooded fighter sprints forward, throwing their entire body. It is way too slow. Lanson effortlessly slides past the clumsy arc rocketing but a split second before impact, he hits the brakes, freezing his steel. Changing tactics. Lanson brings his weight crashing down, right on top of with a lightning-fast smack of the flat of his blade, he sends the kid sprawling. Totally overwhelmed, the tiny fighter scrambles backward, frantically throwing up their sword in sheer terror. As the lingering dust clears away, Lanson towers over the trembling rookie, radiating total, uncontested dominance. For a brief second, guilt twinges in his chest. Did he go too hard on an absolute amateur? The hooded kid stares up at him wide-eyed and rattled, desperate. Realizing they are completely outmatched, the rookie scrambles to their feet and immediately waves the white flag, offering a stiff, formal bow of absolute surrender. The mysterious fighter turns tail and scurries away, leaving Lanson staring blankly across the empty courtyard. Lanson just awkwardly scratches the back of his neck. Well, that was weird. Fast forward to that evening. The brutal exchange. The massive dining hall is absolutely packed. Tables groan under the weight of gourmet feasts, and the air buzzes with high society energy. Elites clink fancy crystal glasses, enjoying a surprisingly peaceful night. Standing by the buffet in their crisp white uniforms, Lanson and a stunning blonde senior both let out a massive sigh of relief. Miraculously, the afternoon's friendly bloodbaths. Taking a sip of her drink, she prays to God the rest of this stuffy party stays totally drama-free. Lanson suddenly clears his throat, looking dead serious. But his pressing issue... Flashing a smug grin, the blonde flips her hair. She proudly claims her stunning dress is textbook banquet fashion, playfully mocking him for having zero sense of style. Unfazed, Lanson points straight down. He loudly points out that pairing a ridiculously expensive ball gown with beat-up running sneakers is a complete disaster. Her smug smile instantly shatters. He just publicly knew. Face burning beet red, she aggressively pivots and stomps away into the crowd. Watching her throw a tantrum, Lanson just sighs. Standing there by himself, he shakes off the weird vibe and shifts his focus back to the sprawling hall. It hits him that over 30 days have already slipped by since he first crashed at this place. Since the Book of Fate loves tossing him across the timeline, he figured some major drama would pop off during this whole meet and greet. But since it's been dead quiet, he starts second-guessing his own paranoia. That thought shatters when the hooded trainee marches up, drops a stiff bow, and formally introduces himself as Milo Hyson. Ransom instantly clocks him as the kid he absolutely wrecked earlier today. Milo bends at the waist, practically vibrating with excitement, and starts totally fanboying over him. He babbles about how epic it was, watching Ransom wipe the floor with everyone using those crazy skills, calling their duel an absolute honor. Totally blindsided by this hyper-energy, Ransom forces out a clunky reply. In his head, he's like, Milo then drops a bombshell about his own weird body type. Yanking back his hood, he casually announces he's a half-elf. Ransom's jaw practically hits the floor. Elves are. Milo goes on to explain how normal folks can easily chat with blade spirits. But thanks to his bloodline, he completely sucks at linking up with spirits trapped inside forged metal. That's exactly why he idolizes Ransom. He dreams of being a total badass who can seamlessly weave both weapon and nature spirits together. The hardcore worship makes Ransom cringe internally. He knows full well he doesn't have a single drop of special blood in his veins. Still looking at Milo brings back memories of his own loyal rookies from the old days. He just can't bring himself to shatter the kid's illusions. So Ransom plays along. He pats him on the back and swears that with enough blood, sweat, and tears, that dream is totally within reach. Milo's face lights up. He eagerly shares that some trendy new treatment has been helping him bond with his sword spirit lately. Ransom nods along politely, but red flags are going off in his head. This treatment screams sketchy black market steroid craze. Suddenly, a massive wave of panic slices through the chatter. Something's going down in the banquet room. Milo stares up at the ceiling, eyes sparkling, and cheerfully announces that he points out that the legendary, mind-bending psychedelic moon has finally risen. To the half-elf, it's this breathtaking, once-in-a-month masterpiece that looks absolutely magical from their spot. Ransom, on the other hand, glares up at the freakish anomaly. Seriously beautiful. The kid needs his eye. Floating out there is a glaring, neon triangle of a moon, warping the night sky into a creepy alien canvas. Every survival instinct in Ransom's body screams that things are about to go horribly. All around them, high society guests start violently convulsing. Pure terror erupts as a sickening mutation rips through the crowd. The fancy gala shatters into total pandemonium. Dozens of people are snapping at once. Ransom stands frozen, stunned, as the madness skyrockets way past. The infected victims violently claw at their own skin, morphing into nightmares right in front of the screaming survivors. In seconds, elegant nobles twist into massive hulking wolf freaks. It clicks. This bloodbath. This is exactly the disaster the Book of Fate was screaming about. Before Ransom can draw his weapon, Milo collapses, clutching his stomach. He lets out a pathetic whimper. The sick mutation, choking on tears, the boy gasps that his insides feel like they're melting. Ransom shouts his name, his heart pounding. It's gut-wrenching. This sweet, starry-eyed kid is getting sucked into the same hellish nightmare. With fur already bursting through his skin, Milo begs. Ransom slides to his knees, gripping the boy's shoulders. He desperately screams at him to fight it, even as the kid's face cracks and stretches into a terrifying snout. Yet through the agony, Milo, barely hanging on to his humanity, Milo forces out a heartbreaking confession. He only ever wanted to be a real knight. That pure, simple dream hits Ransom like a freight train. He freezes, completely paralyzed by a toxic mix of suffocating grief and explosive rage. Out of nowhere, a fully turned werewolf rockets straight at his throat. Its razor-sharp talons swipe down in a lethal arc. Ransom twists away by a hair's breadth. His grief evaporates. His eyes turn to ice as raw, lethal instinct takes the wheel. He pivots, launching a bone-shattering kick that sends the beast rocketing across the room. The monster slams violently into the marble tiles, but it instantly scrambles back up. It spits blood and snarls wounded, but just then a horrible blur of motion catches his eye. It's Milo. The fully turned boy launches himself into the air, and Ransom screams his name in pure agony. For one fatal second, Ransom freezes. That split second of pity almost costs him his life. Another beast blindsides him, its glowing red claws ripping violently into his protective blue aura. Enough is enough. Ransom roars, unleashing a massive descending spirit charge strike that violently flattens the monster. Another lichen slides under the radar, claws out, ready to shred his flank. Ransom's gaze goes dead cold, glowing with an intense focus as his senses instantly hit overdrive. Azure spirit aura erupts from his frame. He whips up a defensive arc, dead stopping a leaping monster right in its tracks. Amidst the sheer chaos, he screams into the fray, desperate to figure out what sparked this absolute nightmare. The creature's reply, with pure brutality, hammering. Gritting his teeth, it dawns on him that his blade isn't cutting deep enough to uncover the actual truth behind the ambush. Nor is it calming his spiraling mind. His steel, but the entire clash just feels completely off. A chilling wave of dread begins to wash over him. He realizes he's completely unable to strike a fatal finishing blow like he normally would. Suddenly, a recognizable voice screams his name, yanking him right back to reality. The blonde upperclassman rushes headlong into the fray. She rips a fiery trail right through a mutant that was seconds away from ending his life, barking at Ransom to snap the hell out of it. Pointing at the door, she yells at him to move, or they're both dead meat. But he pushes back, desperate, because Milo is still trapped and swallowed by the horde. But the entire hall, the mutated freaks are literally ripping each other to shreds, turning any hope of saving his friend into a total pipe dream. A firm grip on his shoulder violently yanks him back to the grim, unavoidable truth of their situation. Choking down his immense guilt, Ransom finally nods, choosing to fall back for the time being. While dodging and weaving, he rapidly calculates that every single brute here packs an absolutely insane amount of raw power. He pitches a plan to aim straight for the throats, while she deflects their swipes. She snaps back that if he's got breath to strategize, he'd better not lag behind. Her unwavering grit anchors him, and his expression completely hardens. Moving as one, they dash. The mutant tips its snout to the ceiling and lets out a bone-chilling roar, clearly calling in even heavy. More lichens immediately howl in response, severely ramping up the terrifying, suffocating tension. In mere seconds, they are completely boxed in from all angles. Ransom forcibly steadies his rapidly racing lungs. He channels Azure Spirit power straight into his steel. Crackling electric-like energy coils around his muscles. As he drops into a flaw, he squints, and time itself practically crawls to a halt. With one brutal azure swipe, he slices a monster completely in half. The horror stumbles backward, as thick, pitch-black sludge erupts from its chest. Simultaneously, the upperclassman carves right through a second hostile, unleashing a blinding golden wave. She drops a whole cluster of beasts right at Ransom. They try to drown him in sheer numbers, but he immediately the impact launches a group of them straight into the air. The senior instantly capitalizes, unleashing a storm of graceful yet extremely deadly thrusts. Her blade absolutely shreds through the pack, leaving a massive trail of bodies across the corridor. Seizing that tiny, precious window of opportunity, the duo hits the gas and fiercely sprints forward. The massive exit gates finally peek through the gloom. Pushing their adrenaline even higher, she hollers that as soon as they bust outside, they can easily link up with the Night Order. Mid-stride, she pieces it all together, yelling that these freaks are definitely hunting the treasure their leader smuggled in. She swears they desperately need to wreck that plan. But just before they crash through the gates, a new wave of nightmares spawns to completely barricade the exit. Spotting just one lone obstacle standing directly in their path, she winds up for a final rush. But Ransom violently yanks her back, screaming a desperate warning. His gut screams that things are horribly off, right as the very gravity and oxygen around them start to sickeningly warp. A sickening, gruesome cluster of acting exactly like sentient javelins, the fleshy whips violently explode across the entire hallway, completely sealing off their only way out. The blonde upperclassman immediately clocks the incredibly deadly shift. Pivoting straight to this fresh nightmare, she fiercely unleashes a blinding flurry of radiant energy. Trying to swat down the plunging vines, her rapid strikes weave a brilliant, glowing net of pure steel, snapping easily through an endless flood of those sickening crimson ropes. Staring at the frozen carnage, it hits Ransom that he's completely tapped into the legendary sword trust state, where his response time is practically instantaneous. Riding that absolute hyper-focus, he aggressively orders the senior to sprint for the exit, while he personally holds the line. Chopped bits of the vines splatter all over the ground, but terrifyingly, the severed chunks violently squirm and begin creeping forward all over again. The nightmare isn't over yet. Ransom pivots on a dime, his eyes tracking a sudden, lethal shift in the monster's assault. A fresh, fleshy vine lashes down from the ceiling. He intercepts the strike, deflecting it with a crackling crescent of blue aura. The severed chunks squirm on the floor, knitting themselves back together. He quickly realizes that mindlessly hacking away is pointless. These things just keep healing. Another whip-like appendage snaps from the flank, forcing Ransom and his senior to instantly press their backs together in defense. The pulsating tentacle snakes through the air, with Leapt. She flinches just a split second too late, and the vicious blow bypasses her blade entirely. The alien limb snags her waist, launching her violently toward the rafters. Ransom spins around, screaming out as he lunges desperately to save her. Dangling midair, absolute terror floods her face as she braces for the inevitable. A massive, jagged spike impales her right through the chest. Ransom stops dead in his tracks. That gruesome, bloody image brands itself permanently. Pure, unadulterated rage and sorrow detonate from his core, erupting in a blinding shockwave of azure energy. He rips through the air with a colossal spinning strike. Completely mutilated segments rain down on the stone tiles, twitching like discarded slabs of raw meat. But even shredded to pieces, the grotesque fragments ooze and merge back into a towering pole. He glares down the regenerating monstrosity, planting his boots firmly into the ground. There is absolutely no retreating now. He propels himself into the fray, springing off a monster's rotting corpse to launch himself high above the chaos. Jaw clenched and eyes burning with deadly intent, he plows straight through a hurricane of lethal strikes instead of backing down. Soaring over the crushing mass of tentacles, he hoists his glowing blade high for the killing blow. In a single ruthless arc, he splits the monster's core wide open. He crashes back down into a puddle of sizzling necrotic ash. Looming tall, he stares coldly at the ruined husk of his slaughtered enemy. The radiant blue flames engulfing his katana slowly fizzle out as the immediate danger turns to dust. He gasps for air, his lungs burning while a haunting silence swallows the corridor. Refusing to glance back at the bloodshed, he drags his exhausted body toward the exit. He shoves the heavy oak doors apart, stepping out into the frigid night air. The courtyard is a total slaughterhouse. Heavily armored knights are actively clashing with rabid beasts in a frantic, bloody war zone. Face smeared with crimson, and eyes hollow with trauma, Ransom absorbs the sheer magnitude of the apocalypse around him. He gazes up at the sky, mesmerized by a sinister, unnatural. A terrifying thought hits him. That mesmerizing illumination might actually be ground zero for this whole disaster. Gritting his teeth against the horrifying revelation, he plants his foot forward, refusing to give up. Instead of crumbling in despair, he grips his hilt tighter and marches. The swordsman drops to his knees in utter defeat. His mind flashes back to a savage werewolf-like beast that walked away from the massacre completely unscathed. He remembers the mangled corpse of a blonde warrior, a horrific monument to his own absolute failure. Sprawled out on the cold dirt, he stares vacantly into the void, suffocating under the crushing weight of his guilt. He finally admits the bitter truth. Even after, suddenly a mysterious woman's voice echoes in his mind, snapping him violently back to reality. She reveals a cosmic secret: fracturing causality can reverse time itself. But these retries. A radiant floating tome materializes right in front of his face, parting with a fleeting cryptic wish for good fortune. Scanning the ancient pages, he uncovers a fragmented log detailing Master Clear's triumphant return after looting a cultist relic. The text fades out, but that single breadcrumb is. The pieces finally click together. The key to fixing this apocalypse is hidden within that stolen artifact buried deep in his own timeline. An enigmatic, glowing timepiece takes center stage. Reality shatters like a crashing tidal wave hitting solid rock, completely resetting the world beneath a brilliantly clear sky. He blinks, finding himself cloaked and riding in the back of a bouncing wooden wagon. He gasps for air, his heart pounding, as an older man sitting nearby spots him immediately, calling out his name with unmistakable familiarity. Ransom. The master softly reminisces about the sheer luck that crossed their paths, turning this wandering boy into his prized apprentice. A massive wave of relief and paralyzing anxiety washes over Ransom. He is back at square one. He responds to his teacher with measured words, desperately trying to keep his cool in this pain. The tension spikes the second they question his war plunder, making the heavy chest between them the absolute center of attention. Peeking inside, his master instantly recognizes the loot as holy relics ripped straight from the hands of the cultist. Hearing that, a sickening realization hits Ransom. This exact loot is the trigger for the looming apocalypse. He frantically tries to sound the alarm, desperately trying to explain the bloodbath this box will cause, but the old man shuts him down before he can even stutter out a warning. Completely unfazed, the master calmly declares that this mess is entirely Ransom's problem to fix. Stunned by the brush-off, Ransom desperately demands to know what the hell he means by that. With a heavy sigh, the old warrior admits he's just as clueless about the root cause, tossing the deadly puzzle entirely into his disciple's lap out of sheer pity. A bitter pill to swallow, but the crushing reality finally sets in. He has to swallowing his frustration, he drops the argument and boldly demands a completely different favor. He begs to be stripped down to the absolute basics and taught the blade from scratch. A faint knowing smirk creeps across the master's face. He definitely approves. The old man figures this total reset might be the exact spark the kid desperately needs right now. Stepping out onto the dirt training grounds, the two warriors lock eyes and pull their steel, ready to throw down. The master promises to give him a brutal taste of the absolute peak he needs to reach. To prove his point, the old warrior flares his weapon to life. Then he barks at Ransom to swing with absolute murderous intent. Without hesitation, the kid channels a swirling storm of deep blue energy straight into his hilt, putting his entire soul on the line. With laser-focused grit, he explodes forward, unleashing a blistering first strike. The raw swing erupts into a colossal, twisting. Terrified bystanders scramble backward as the so-called practice spar violently escalates into a lethal showdown. But the old man, he doesn't even blink at the incoming meat grinder. Holding his glowing weapon steady, he casually lets the roaring vortex inch closer, treating the lethal wave like a mere pop quiz rather than an actual threat. Right before impact, he effortlessly parries the blast with flawless precision. His counterattack slices the raging blue tsunami clean in half, with one blinding flash of gold. Ransom's jaw hits the dirt, completely mind-blown by The master brands this ultimate stage the true pinnacle of the blade, calling the raw, glowing power simply steel aura. He breaks it down perfectly. True mastery isn't just swinging metal. It's literally fusing your very spirit and the weapon into one living, breathing. Ransom is ordered to burn this glowing image into his brain and forge his own soul exactly like he would temper hot iron. The brutal lesson wraps up with the two standing in dead silence, the kid's ultimate goal finally crystallized. A cocky blonde knight is tasked with babysitting the rest of the rookies, while Ransom breaks off to grind completely solo. He fiercely grips onto one desperate prayer. If he can just bulk up his power, he might actually save them this time. Sweating blood on the royal courtyard, he pushes his body to the absolute, endlessly drilling his combat stances, instead of calm, focused discipline. Even under the pitch-black sky, he's out there swinging at shadows, desperately hunting for that golden spark. But then the heavy courtyard bell rings out, officially kicking off his absolute worst nightmare. A mind-bending neon portal aggressively rips open across, pulling the final trigger on the impending bloodbath. Deep inside the fortress walls, everyone else is just gaping at the sky in total awe, completely oblivious to the slaughter heading their way. But Ransom's blood runs ice cold. He knows exactly what time it is. Hell on Earth is officially back in session. That creepy, glowing, pyramid-shaped rift. Just like clockwork, the rookies start violently mutating into massive, bloodthirsty wolf beasts. Ransom simply clenches his jaw, locking in. Refusing to freeze up like a deer in headlights again, his mind flashes back to the frantic 2-week window right after his timeline reset, when he aggressively hunted down the shady medical trial Milo had blabbed about. He had scoured the dusty archives for any nasty chemicals tied to the experiment, but came up completely empty-handed. His traumatic flashbacks snap back to Milo's bones, violently snapping and twisting as the beastly infection first took hold. That gut-wrenching visual serves as his final terrifying proof the universe is forcefully dragging him toward the exact same blood-soaked ending. Watching his past night, he accepts that doomsday has formally arrived. He drops to his knees beside his mutating friend, practically begging the guy to fight off the beast just a few seconds longer. But Milo completely loses the mental battle, letting out a gut-churning demonic screech. In response, Ransom channels every ounce of that icy blue sword aura he's been grinding for since he leaped back in time. His knuckles turn dead white as he makes the dark choice of putting these monsters in the dirt is the only way out. He'll slaughter every last one of them. He slashes straight through the first lunging freak before its claws can rip his throat out. But instantly, a massive pack of mutated trainees closes in from the shadows. Back against the wall, he makes his choice. He is going to slaughter every last one of them. A massive blur of fur and fangs lunges at him, forcing us, but this time the fear is gone. This time he can actually. His cerulean blade glides effortlessly through the nightmare creatures. Finally, he possesses the brute strength to end them. With a fluid sidestep and a single blinding flash of steel, He bypasses a monster cleanly, severing its throat in his wake. Momentum carries him forward, chaining the strike into a brutal, sweeping arc that scatters toxic black blood across the stone. But a deafening crash behind him shatters his focus. Total chaos is still. There is Milo, fully morphed into an abomination, viciously mauling a downed beast, while Ransom screams his name. Ransom sprints toward his friend, absolutely terrified that the humanity left inside him is slipping away forever. His blind panic leaves him wide open. Another grotesque freak ambushes him from the blind spot, inches from a lethal bite. Instinct kicks in at the literal last second. He pivots with icy calculation, unleashing a blinding surge of blue light that, even so, the cavernous hall vibrates with blood-curdling howls. This nightmare is just getting started. A pack of the mutated horrors circles him, looking to bury him under sheer crushing numbers. Right in the heart of the slaughter, a faint, agonizing voice cuts through the din. It is Milo, trapped inside the beast, desperately calling out for him. That broken plea slams into Ransom like a freight train, echoing Milo's childhood dream of becoming a... Suddenly, a blonde warrior storms into the fray, barking Ransom's name. Refusing to let him drown in despair, she flanks him, delivering a sharp reality check that violently yanks him back to the present. "Freeze up now and we are both dead meat," she yells, stabbing a finger toward their only viable exit. Scanning the meat grinder around them, she realizes these things are built like tanks. They desperately need a tactical split. "I will take their heads," she commands. "You cripple their claws and carve open a path." Ransom shoves his grief down into the dark. Jaw clenched, he drops into a low, coiled stance. She shouts his name again, putting total faith in his vanguard strike. Ahead, 4 massive werewolves hunker down, muscle rippling as they prep to pounce. Instead of waiting, Ransom goes completely ballistic. He launches himself straight into the teeth of the pack. The beasts vault forward to meet him, igniting, throwing everything on the line. Ransom buries his blade deep into the lead horror, violently arresting its momentum with a desperate opening slash. A primal roar tears from his lungs as the sheer agonizing intensity of the brawl pushes him right to the brink of the abyss. Suddenly, the chaos fades into a tranquil memory. A quiet night under an ocean of stars, where the blonde knight catches him charting the 13 gods constellation to find north. She figures out his navigation trick immediately. When she asks how he learned it, he tosses a gentle smirk back at his old mentor. "You always said the stars never lie about where you stand," he murmurs. "Figured you would be looking to them tonight." He pauses, staring upward. "When you look at them, do you ever get this massive, burning need to protect all of this?" She softens, admitting that she does. This city gave her absolutely everything she has. "Then why risk it all to shield me?" he asks. Her answer is simple. If he survives, he is the one who will keep this city safe. Chewing on her old lessons about blade control, he asks a deeper question. Can a sword ever swing without the wielder actually wanting it to? She reads right through him. He is utterly terrified of losing control of his own terrifying power. "Once you reach the peak," she reassures him, "there is no difference. The weapon and the warrior bleed into one entity. The swing is just your soul made visible." Those words echo as the memory shatters, snapping Ransom back to the deafening clash of the present. His sword paints a massive, deadly arc through the swarming pack, erupting a geyser of toxic black sludge across the masonry. One of the mutated freaks literally detonates under the crushing kinetic impact of his strike. Death drops from the ceiling as more abominations dive-bomb him. Gritting his teeth, he plows straight through a rain of severed limbs, butchering a path to the stragglers. Laser-focused, he violently twists his core, winding up for a devastating, all-or-nothing haymaker. A blinding tsunami of azure energy explodes from his blade. It completely obliterates the charging pack in a single burst, leaving the ground choked with butchered carcasses. Chest heaving, he stands in the wreckage. He survived the onslaught, but the actual war is far from over. The blonde knight scrambles over the gore, absolutely livid. Furious, he just threw away the life she almost died to save. Panting, he shoots a half-glance over his shoulder. "Hey!" he gasps out. At least, refusing to let off the gas, he barks that if she has enough breath to complain, she has enough left to keep swinging. Before the words even leave her mouth, another lichen hurls itself at them. He intercepts the beast, slicing it cleanly in half with a brutal horizontal slap. Moving in perfect, deadly sync, a sliver of hope blooms in his chest. Looking at the mountain of corpses, he genuinely believes he pulled it off. saving Aiden and slaughtering the Alpha Mon. He desperately wonders if he has finally broken the curse of failure. But that fleeting victory shatters the second Aiden spots a pack of surviving lichens, bolting from the blood-soaked hall, making a frantic dash for the city streets. He barks a frantic order to chase them down immediately. If those ravenous beasts sink their teeth into helpless civilians, a true massacre will erupt. Suddenly a familiar, sickeningly bright glow catches the corner of his eye, flooding his veins with pure dread. He knows that sinister radiance all too well. The curse has returned, and a cold system prompt confirms his absolute worst nightmare. History remains completely unbroken. The Book of Fate violently tears open, devouring this ruined timeline of causality, and violently dragging his soul back through time once emerald light explodes from its shifting pages as reality unravels in reverse. The cosmic ledger locks onto a brand new anchor point in the past, exactly 2 days earlier. The exact moment they confiscated the cultist treasure. The timeline firmly anchors on November 23rd. Awakening to yet another desperate loop, the harsh daylight blinds him. He sits fully cloaked, rattling along in the back of the transport wagon, alongside the secured loot. Merely surviving the upcoming trial will not cut it this time. Shifting silently on the wooden plank, his mind begins frantically mapping out a radically different. Staring dead at the sealed chest, a massive realization hits him. If guarding this dark artifact is the true mission he needs, it's power to ascend to the sword expert realm. Without crossing that legendary threshold, the impending bloodbath will utterly crush him. Turning to the grizzled master sitting beside him, he drops all formalities. He stares the old man in the eye and bluntly demands to know exactly how to shatter his limits and become a sword expert. The veteran swordsman quietly studies the boy, sensing the chaotic energy radiating from him. He calmly notes that Ransom is violently trying to force the awakening, despite being barely half a breath away from achieving it. Ransom bitterly confesses that he feels that exact, agonizing flashbacks of the lichen's blinding speed crash into his mind, mocking his sluggish, inadequate blade work. He knows mere physical agility is useless against them, and that his current limits simply equal a death sentence. He vividly remembers burying his blade into one monster, only to feel another breathing down his neck instantly. The brutal memory hones in on a singular, grim. His killing strikes simply were not lethal enough, nor fast enough. The terrifying phantom sensation of being swarmed by claws, moving faster than a human thought, rips through his nerves. Snapping back to the swaying wagon, he grinds his teeth, admitting that no matter how fiercely he orders his blade to move, it stubbornly fights his grip. The old master chuckles darkly, pointing out that his iron grip is the exact flaw. To hammer the lesson home, he asks the boy if he physically commands or his stomach to process food. Ransom scoffs, obviously shaking his head no. The master's gaze turns piercing as he explains that a true blade is never dominated but seamlessly embraced. That profound truth strikes Ransom utterly speechless as the philosophical shift finally clicks in his brain. An old forgotten proverb suddenly echoes in his mind. Sword trust is not wielding a weapon, but achieving total harmony instead of tyrannical control. The veteran clarifies that sword trust isn't some mythical power-up. It is simply the bridge merging the warrior's flesh with the steel. To prove his point, he strictly forbids Ransom from drawing his blade under any circumstance, leaving the boy incredibly baffled. The master leans in, declaring that Ransom must wait until the weapon intuitively draws itself. Ransom instantly fights back, his chest tight, with the suffocating pressure of a doomed future ticking down. Rejecting this slow, philosophical nonsense, he fiercely curses his lack of time. The rumbling carriages finally roll past the city gates, and into the academy courtyards, the exact stage for the impending massacre. Aiden's eyes widen in sheer shock the moment she spots his familiar figure. He stares back at her in heavy absolute silence, burdened by the horrifying timeline she has yet to experience. Gazing into his eyes, she immediately senses that despite his habit of silently carrying the weight of the world alone, remains completely unbroken. Oddly enough, that exact stubborn stoicism sends a wave of comforting warmth through her chest. As the crowd buzzes around them, a thick, unsaid gravity hangs in the air between the two. Slowly, Ransom's fingers ghost over his weapon, blindly testing if the cold steel will finally awaken to his touch. He freezes in place, heavily doubting himself, feeling the deadly weight, but missing the spiritual spark. Observing from the shadows, the seasoned master raises a stunned eyebrow, deeply shocked at how rapidly the prodigy is absorbing the cosmic lesson. Finally, Ransom wraps his fingers around the worn leather with pure. The silver blade glides from its scabbard like running water, entirely devoid of force, perfectly marrying the surrounding knights practically foam at the mouth, furious at this blatant disrespect right in front of the Grand Duke. But the Duke raises a single hand, stopping their blades before they can even draw. There's no trace of anger in his voice. Instead, he murmurs that Ransom reminds him of an old ghost from his past. Suddenly, that familiar rush of crackling blue as Ransom completely loses himself in the rhythm of the blade, becoming one with the steel. The Duke locks eyes with him, demanding to know his ultimate goal. Ransom just stands there, gripping his awakened weapon tight. Pushed into a corner, he drops the act. His response is brutally honest and rock solid. Aiden. And this entire city. He swears he's going to shield them all. Fast forward, and a heavy darkness blankets the grand hall. The stage is set for a night of feasting and absolute slaughter. Lavish dishes cover the tables in a terrifyingly peaceful scene, completely blind to the impending bloodbath. Ransom, Aiden, and a fellow rookie huddle up inside the massive room as the festivities kick off. One tiny footstep echoes. The final second of peace. In a brief moment of Aiden shoots him a grateful smile, thanking him for scoring her a decent pair of heels so she wouldn't miss the graduation gala. She laughs, joking that she almost had to sprint back to the barracks to swap outfits halfway through the party. He flashes a soft grin, teasing that she would have just made a massive scene. But deep down, his mind is racing. He knows sticking by their side is the only way to keep them breathing when all hell breaks loose. When they catch him zoning out, he brushes it off with a totally cryptic excuse. Their buddy playfully jabs at Aiden for tripping over her own 2 feet, prompting her to furiously defend herself, swearing it was a total fluke. Ransom's smile vanishes. His jaw clenches. He can practically feel the fabric of time stretching to its absolute. The Book of Fate flashes a grim warning into his mind. This is it. He's down to his very last shot after rewinding the clock this far back. A heavy chime rings out, shattering the chatter. 0 hour is here. A warped, sickly moon crawls into the sky, kicking off. The monstrous wolves are getting supercharged. Ransom takes a deep breath, locking and swears on his life that he won't fail this time. The mutated beasts smash through the doors, and the screaming starts all over again. Aiden violently flinches, paralyzed by the horrific nightmare tearing through the guests. Ransom aggressively grabs her shoulders, forcing her to snap out of it. He barks out orders, demanding she rally the royal guards and drag every single defenseless cadet out of that death trap right now. She pushes back, frantically yelling that they have to slaughter these freaks first, or nobody's making it out alive. He shuts her down instantly. He promises to act as human bait, holding the line until the hall is clear. But then she needs to round up every sword she can find. He grabs her arm one last time, dropping a massive bombshell. She has to sprint south, track down an eerie glowing beacon, and smash it to pieces. Her eyes widen. He knows way too much. She demands to know if he has the inside scoop on this sudden apocalypse. He gives a grim nod. He orders her to follow his exact instructions, even if she has to slice through her own allies to shatter that crystal. While she stutters, he spins around and completely halves a lunging monster. His gaze turns razor sharp as his weapon takes on a terrifying, independent pulse, syncing perfectly with his own heartbeat. A beast lunges at his blind spot, but he effortlessly glides out of the way before the claws even scratch him. His eyes widen in pure shock. His blade is violently parrying strikes before his brain even registers the threat. Right then and there, it hits him. He isn't the one piloting this weapon anymore. The sword is literally dragging his body through the carnage. A massive flood of combat data violently injects right into his brain, crystal clear and terrifyingly fast. Millions of phantom attack lines project directly into his vision, like he's reading the battle's source code. He surrenders to the current slicing through flesh with cold-blooded precision. Finally, it clicks. He has officially crossed the threshold into the legendary realm of sword insight. Hordes of ravenous lycanthropes swarm him from all sides, but he doesn't even flinch. He plants his feet tight against the marble and lets the steel dictate the massacre. An absolute hurricane of blinding azure energy explodes from his core, dicing the entire pack into ribbons before they even enter his breathing space. As mutilated carcasses hit the floor, a massive realization hits him. He actually butchered them before a single one could breach the exits. The grand ballroom is drowning in dead monsters, proving he just solo-wiped the entire indoor invasion. Chest heaving, he desperately tries to convince himself the worst is over. But one lone beast is still breathing, huddled on the floor, whimpering in agony instead of lunging for his throat. Ransom drops to his knees, his voice cracking as he begs Milo to fight the monstrous urge, swearing he'll find a cure. Milo groans, his human voice barely surviving the horrific mutation. He shakes his head, refusing to accept that grim reality. Ransom fights back the crushing wave of despair, desperately insisting that the local mages will uncover a miracle to save him. But Milo just offers a heartbreaking apology, gently reminding Ransom that he softly explains that this cruel fate is permanently sealed. Tears welling in his eyes, Milo pleads for just one final blessing, to leave this world as a human. Swallowing his grief, Ransom honors that tragic request, delivering a swift, merciful killing blow. Milo slumps forward, his agonizing torment finally drawing to a close. As the lingering remnants of the curse shatter his lifeless body, slowly morphs back to its original form. But before Ransom can even process his grief, vicious crimson chains whip through the air, lunging straight for him. He grits his teeth in pure frustration, realizing the twisted cult is still pulling the strings. In a flash, he hoists his blade to deflect the deadly incoming binding. The heavy metal links smash into the ground with an explosive shockwave, right as Milo's earthly remains disintegrate into ash. Staring at the fading embers, Ransom whispers that his friend has endured enough, inviting him to return as true family in his next life. He makes a solemn vow that if that day ever arrives, he will give him the incredible life he deserved. Delivering his final goodbye, the warrior slides his bloodied sword into its scabbard. He sprints across the crumbling, devastated hall, leaving the tragic casualties behind, to hunt down the mastermind orchestrating this massacre. Skidding to a halt right at the doorway, he scans the darkened horizon, hunting for the specific flare he warned Aiden to watch for. Finding the skies completely empty of that eerie glow, a massive wave of relief washes over him. Aiden actually managed to obliterate it on the outside. Meanwhile, Aiden frantically tears through the crumbling city streets, screaming. Mid-stride, chaotic intel floods her earpiece. Ransom took a direct hit, but the sinister master's restraints have been completely shattered. Her brutal strike against the cult leader was the ultimate game-changer, because the very second that puppet master drops and the eerie glow evaporates, the bloodthirsty werewolves instantly begin to lose. Watching the vicious beasts bleed out their supernatural strength, she smirks. The high-stakes gamble paid off perfectly. Back inside the ruined manor, a mystical shimmer from the Book of Fate congratulates Ransom for finally stepping up. But suddenly, Aiden's instincts scream danger, and she freezes dead in her tracks, utterly spooked. Miles away, a mysterious woman steps into a totally trashed courtyard, feeling a familiar pulse. Ransom Jr. is officially back on the board. Beneath the haunting silver moonlight, the battered metropolis holds its breath in a chilling, post-apocalyptic silence. Out of nowhere, Ransom materializes right in the heart of the completely leveled Cushion City. Catching his balance, a fleeting pang of regret hits him. He never even got the chance to tell Aiden how incredibly she performed. Shaking off the sentiment, he snaps, realizing he is standing in downtown Cushion City, and chillingly calculates that taking in the grotesque mounds of corpses and apocalyptic ruin, he nods grimly. The sprawling city has plunged into absolute anarchy, exactly like he immediately charges toward the last remaining stronghold, desperately hoping his family found sanctuary behind its walls. Since his siblings were nowhere near the Ilnian manor during the bloodbath, he deduces they managed to evacuate. Staring at the massive fortress looming ahead, he knows in his gut it is the only logical safe zone left. That impenetrable safe haven happens to be none other than Pietro Berni Castle. Knowing Ribera's deep connection with Saya, he figures she absolutely dragged his brothers and sisters here to ride out the storm. Even though he trusts Ribera with their lives, he absolutely has to see their faces and confirm their. But just before he breaches the gates, Katrina springs from the shadows, pressing a weapon to his neck and viciously demanding who sent him. Caught dead in this, he immediately gauges his attacker's terrifying skill level just by the sheer crushing pressure. Instead of panicking, he coolly wraps his fingers around his own hilt. With a lightning-fast parry, he shatters her offensive grip, forcefully spinning Katrina around to face him head-on. The exact second their eyes lock, he violently gasps her name in pure disbelief. Katrina freezes solid, her hostile glare melting, as she realizes the deadly intruder is actually her long-lost brother. All of her fierce suspicion vanishes, replaced by a wild euphoric shock, as she confirms Ransom is breathing and standing right in front of her. She totally explodes into a chaotic frenzy of absolute joy, while he just stands there, totally overwhelmed by this explosive, heartwarming reunion. When he frantically asks when they made it back, Katrina babbles that they slipped in just 2 days ago, right after Saya tipped them off about the impending raid on Ja's compound. Completely bursting with adrenaline, Katrina screams at the top of her lungs, ordering everyone inside to get out there right now. Within seconds, a blue-haired boy and an older gentleman sprint through the doors, absolutely paralyzed with shock and monumental relief that ran. 2 more sisters burst onto the scene, one sobbing uncontrollably, the other utterly speechless. As the unbelievable news ripples through the camp, the fiery red-haired sister just stares, her brain struggling to process that he is actually standing in the flesh. Flashing a gentle, reassuring smile, Ransom raises his hand, anchoring them to the reality that he is truly alive. Seeing his entire family huddled together unharmed, the heavy emotional weight of finally being home washes over his soul. He pulls his trembling siblings into a massive, crushing hug and softly whispers, "I'm home." But the tear-jerking moment is brutally cut short when Rivera marches in, snapping everyone to attention, coldly stating that the city's apocalyptic crisis leaves. Her face darkens as she reveals exactly what has unfolded in the agonizing weeks since Ashley has practically devoured half of Kushan City whole. Ransom is absolutely floored. How did a 2-bit bandit boss climb the food chain this damn fast? Rivera confesses she was just as blindsided, admitting her crew was inches away from being wiped out by him before Ransom showed up. When Ransom presses her on exactly what kind of leverage the guy used, Rivera freezes. Her heavy silence screams that the truth is sickening. The red-haired sister finally chokes out the twisted truth. Ashley wants to drag her down the aisle. Ransom's jaw practically hits the floor. He genuinely wonders if then the sheer absurdity kicks in. He reacts like he just heard the most unhinged joke in the world, flat out demanding she repeat herself. Still reeling from the sheer audacity of the proposal, Rivera starts breaking down exactly how Ashley made his move. A mere 3 days after Ransom dropped off the grid, this rat rapidly amassed power by swooping up the territory's military. He forged dirty alliances with every corrupt and dragged the neutral factions right into his web. He even swallowed up Caesar's elite Red Warrior Corps, snatching half the city's entire combat force in under 7 days. To throw gasoline on the fire, he bought out the infamous Calceric Brotherhood. Ransom absorbs this bomb with terrifying, ice-cold silence, processing just how violently the landscape shifted during his absence. He realizes a brutal truth. If he had delayed his return even a fraction longer, his siblings can practically feel the murderous heat radiating off him. But he just stares back, insisting with eerie composure that he is completely 100%, which naturally freaks everyone out even more. He simply asks where he can find this guy, and Rivera spills the details. Tomorrow marks the city's grand joint conference. She explains that literally every armed syndicate in Kushan City will be packed into one room. They are meeting to carve up the territory, and Ashley will be front and center. Ransom flashes a dark smirk. That is because it means he can sweep out Ashley and the rest of the city's garbage in one massive bloodbath. Rivera quickly slams the brakes on that idea, warning him that the city cannot afford to lose all its fighters, while demonic beasts are still prowling outside the wall. She argues that no matter how much scum these factions are, they still need some muscle to keep basic public order from collapsing. To back up her point, she slides a heavy ledger across the table. It is a straight-up hit list. Ransom flips the cover open, his eyes scanning the... Rivera breaks it down. Blue ink means the crew has a shred of decency. Black ink means they are pure evil, and red falls somewhere in the murky middle. Ransom coldly points out that even the red crews are bleeding people dry, with narcotics and predatory loans. But Rivera pushes back, insisting they have to tolerate them just to keep the city from tearing itself apart. When somebody asks if Ashley is sitting in that red zone, the entire room goes dead silent. Ransom's gaze turns to ice as he makes his final. He verifies that every single name on this list will be at the summit tomorrow. Rivera nods, looking relieved. He snaps the book shut, declaring that he will take it from here. When morning hits, the shattered city wakes up to a glaringly bright sky, a cruel mockery of the surrounding wreckage. Warlords and thugs pack into the ruins for the summit. Suddenly, frantic whispers ripple through the mob as someone spots a total ghost stepping into the light. Ransom strolls in, flanked by Katrina and Doro, and the collective jaw of the underworld drops. The dead man is breathing. Katrina steps up, officially introduced as the proxy for the... Doro gets the exact same heavy-hitting introduction. Hearing the commotion, Ashley pivots to face Ransom. Slathering on the fake charm and theatrical respect, he welcomes Ransom back from the grave, acting overjoyed that he cheated death. Ransom responds with a suffocating, dead-eyed stare. Undeterred, Ashley casually drops a question about why Daisy didn't show up. Ransom instantly snaps back, demanding to know why the hell her name is in his mouth. Ashley shamelessly smirks, openly bragging that he has a thing for fierce, fiery women. His sleazy intentions are crystal. Pushing his luck, Ashley asks if Ransom caught wind of his little proposal, smugly suggesting he give it his blessing. He even tries to spin the forced marriage as a strategic blood pact that would heavily benefit the new count. Ransom catches that specific title, narrowing his eyes as he demands to know why Ashley is suddenly calling him a count. Ashley gestures to the crowd, claiming there isn't a soul in the room who would deny Ransom his rightful throne. But he instantly flashes his fangs, reminding Ransom that even royalty cannot ignore him now. Not when he holds 50%. Ransom steps forward. The time for playing games is over. A chilling, razor-thin smile creeps across his face as he locks onto his next move. Rumor has it, a few rats got bold while I was gone, he declares, instantly twisting this little meet and greet into a dead serious trial. Clutching the hit list, he starts rattling off names. Each word drops like a heavy iron gavel. He calls out the Karoo Syndicate first, dragging their dirty laundry into the light, slaughtering a rival household just to steal their turf. Then he gives Katrina the signal. Zero hesitation. Before anyone can choke out a pathetic excuse, Katrina's blade whispers from its sheath. She launches forward to with one scorching, blinding arc of steel, she cleaves the guilty targets in. The rival factions stumble backward, absolutely paralyzed. A simple judgment had just morphed into a full-blown slaughter in the blink of an eye. Ashley tries to force out a cocky laugh, but it dies in his throat. Even he is shaking at the sheer, ice-cold brutality of the new count. But Ransom isn't done. The Lorraine clan, he barks next. Doro instantly answers the call. The Grim Reaper is clocking in. Ransom keeps handing out. Crimson pools begin to swallow the stone floor. The executions rage on until mangled corpses practically... Sweating bullets, Ashley plasters on a fake smile. All right, I think these guys get the message now, he stammers. He steps in, desperate to hit the brakes before this bloodbath spirals. But Ransom silences him with a dead-eyed stare, immediately moving down the list. Panicking, Ashley screams for his hidden heavy hitters to jump in. Tapin Dusk, Kukarak X, and the Shadow Walker, Crickets. When nobody shows up to save his skin, he turns around and snarls at his own crew, cursed. Meanwhile, Katrina and Doro step up directly behind Ransom. Weapons drawn, eyes locked, they are totally locked in for this brutal purge. Cold sweat drips down Ashley's face. The terrifying Wait, listen, I played by the rules, he begs desperately, throwing the other factions under the bus to save his own neck. One of his own cronies snaps. You can't ditch us now, you bastard. We all got rich off the same dirt. That single furious shout confirms exactly what Ransom knew all along. Ransom takes another slow, deliberate step forward. The remaining mob freezes as a horrifying realization hits them. The Count isn't here to make an example. Sizzling azure energy erupts around him like a raging storm. With a sharp shing, Ashley throws up his guard, absolutely suffocating under the crushing weight of Ransom's killing intent. Bam! Ransom's opening strike smashes into Ashley's defenses with the force of a freight train. Knocked back on his heels, Ashley gasps for air. Are you But his fake outrage quickly crumbles into pure terror. Ransom doesn't argue. Instead, he coldly begins listing every single one of Ashley's dirty secrets. The illegal narcotics labs, the underground trafficking rings. Cloaked in an eerie, midnight blue aura, Ransom transforms this rap sheet into a chilling final verdict. He points the blade straight at Ashley. The prime target. Your penalty. Ransom whispers, his voice cutting through the silence. Ashley and his surviving goons bare their teeth, locking in for a fight. But gritting his teeth, Ashley does the math. In a straight-up brawl, he is utterly screwed. Suddenly, he recognizes the footwork, the stance. No way, he chokes out, It's the Crimson Warrior. Pure unfiltered panic hijacks his brain. Just as hope fades, the heavy hitters from the Red Warrior Corps finally crash into the plaza, flanking Ashley, and cranking the tension all the way up to 11. Ransom barely even blinks. Puffing out your chest won't stop you from bleeding. If you push this, we all go down together, you psycho, Ashley screams, practically foaming at the mouth. Ransom's only reply is a devastating wide-arc shockwave of pure blue energy. It rips across the battlefield, carving right into Ashley, before the guy can even twitch. Crash Ashley is slammed hard into the dirt, coughing up blood, his mind spinning from the godlike speed of the attack. The rest of the fighters flinch backward, their jaws drop. How could there? Amidst the dust and groaning bodies, Ransom stands tall. He owns this battlefield. Finally, the legendary fighter Oksala steps from the shadows. Are you seriously willing to burn it all down just to see this through? The veteran rumbles. Ransom meets the old man's gaze without flinching. Make your choice, right now. You're either stepping aside, or you're dying with them. So it's run away or fight to the death, huh? Oksala fires back bluntly. Ransom shakes his head. It's about whether scumbags like you believe you can. Saint or sinner, I don't care. Ransom spits. Oksala's tough exterior cracks. Slowly, the gravity of Ransom's vengeance finally clicks in. A dark memory flashes through Ransom's eyes. Homes burned to ash by this very. In that haunting vision, a tiny, tear-streaked child clings to his mother, screaming and begging for her not to let go. Visions of exploited women bearing unwanted children, and a city suffocating under the weight of countless orphans flash across his mind. But trying to explain that kind of agony to a monster like Ashley is completely useless. Gripping his hilt, he floods his blade with a dark, crackling blue aura. If these bastards refuse to understand, he will just have to bury them. Oksala flinches at the sheer murderous intent burning in Ransom's eyes. In a heartbeat, the swordsman blurs forward. Aiming straight for Oksala and his crew, a lethal slash rips through their front. Before anyone can even raise a shield, Oksala whips around, horrified. Catching on way too late, he shrieks at his forces to strike back before Ransom butchers the entire squad. Pure panic grips the rival factions, forcing them into a desperate, fragile alliance just to survive. Ransom practically welcomes the challenge, coldly daring them to step up so he can slaughter them all at once. The massive mob swarms him from every direction, praying that sheer numbers will crush him. Yet he plants his feet with chilling calm, lowering his stance to face the incoming tidal wave. For a split second, he shuts his eyes and steadies his breath. Then the battlefield lights up as he unleashes a massive, devastating crescent of blue energy. The explosive wave carves right through the charging horde. Blood paints the dirt as bodies are shredded in a single, brutal sweep. Howling in absolute rage, Oksala throws himself forward for one final, desperate lunge. But Ransom's counterattack is a blinding flash, moving way too fast for the naked. Before the mercenary can even finish his swing, his head is violently separated from his shoulders. His headless corpse crumples heavily into the dirt. The surviving thugs stare in absolute horror, realizing this dark-haired monster operates on a completely different level than anything they prepared for. It finally hits them. They are staring down a Grand Master. The young warrior commands the blood-soaked field with terrifying poise. After confirming these are indeed Ashley's hired dogs, he tightens his grip, fully ready to handle the trash himself. What is left of the Calciric Brotherhood can only stand there completely paralyzed by how violently the tables just turned. But instead of insane bloodlust, a faint, almost amused smirk crosses his face as he evaluates his trembling prey. As one of the broken fighters drops to his knees pleading for his life, the swordsman actually pauses his blade. He lets out a sigh, admitting that this situation is incredibly awful. He does not actually see them as pure evil, opting to dominate rather than butcher them all. He barks a harsh command, forcing the men to drop to their knees and throw their hands in the air. Glancing around in sheer terror, the surviving mercenaries realize only about 70 of them are even still breathing, deciding to crush their fighting spirit once and for all. He slams his broadsword directly into the earth, triggering a massive, violent shockwave that wildly shakes the entire zone. Savage blue lightning rips straight through the enemy lines, instantly obliterating any remaining willpower. With his eye glowing brightly in the dust, it is crystal, barely even breaking a sweat. He pushes the devastating assault forward with absolute, cold-blooded precision. A wide sweeping slash cleaves through half a dozen, while broken bodies pile up around his boots. He stands dead center in the chaos, looking exactly like the Grim Reaper. The terrifying reality finally sets in They cannot win this. Mass hysteria erupts, and every single mercenary completely abandons the shrieking at the top of their lungs to retreat. The cowards scramble wildly toward the crumbled walls, desperately trying to flee the slaughterhouse. But right before they cross the threshold, a brutal shower of arrows suddenly rains down from the sky. The runaway thugs take heavy fire, right to the back, collapsing into the dirt before they even taste freedom. Silhouettes of snipers appear along the high ruins, proving this entire zone was a trapped killbox from the start. Pinned down by the relentless storm of steel, the trapped men are violently forced backward, completely cut off from every single exit. The battered fighters freeze in sheer despair, as fresh hostiles suddenly block off their front lines too. Backup finally arrives for our dark-haired protagonist, as two highly skilled allies step onto the field, oozing absolute confidence. Wasting zero time, the fiery-haired brawler violently carves through the closest grunts with a blazing spinning slash. Catching his rhythm, the blue-haired swordsman instantly drops another panicked thug using razor-sharp, flawless technique. Providing heavy cover fire from the high ground, the sniper captain keeps the remaining enemies totally suppressed while knocking another deadly volley. A barrage of glowing green arrows arcs perfectly through the sky, pinning the terrified survivors violently to the ground right where they stand. Not letting a single target slip away, the swordsman sprints after one last runner, ruthlessly cutting him down before he can clear the zone. His sword arcs downward in a devastating final swing, painting the crumbling rubble in a violent splash of crimson. The last, agonizing screams bleed into the desolate winds, marking the grim conclusion of his twilight massacre. Now nothing but a heavy stillness and scavenging crows hover above the wreckage of the battlefield. Crimson droplets slide off cold steel, splashing into the raven-haired warrior stands like a solitary ghost among the mangled bodies, silently absorbing the hellscape he just created. A heavy sigh escapes his lips. Navigating the gruesome sea of gore and debris, a lone survivor nervously steps forward, completely terrified of the man standing before her. "Did you kill them all?" she stammers. Without missing a single beat, he coldly confirms the slaughter. He casually mentions that every single target from the red list and above has been thoroughly wiped off the map. The blue-haired woman desperately questions his need for such absolute annihilation. He goes quiet for a moment, looking beyond mere tactical logic. "For Lena," he confesses, revealing a motive that is raw and deeply personal. He explains that these scum were the exact reason the little girl lost her parents, and he absolutely refuses to let another innocent kid endure that kind of living hell. Yet he openly acknowledges the twisted irony here. These brutal killers were actually a necessary evil to protect a settlement desperate for muscle. Without enough mercenaries to hold back the monster hordes, he admits the entire sanctuary is doomed to fall. This dark reality leaves the woman wrestling with an impossible moral completely incapable of finding a perfect balance between safeguarding the walls and protecting their humanity. A brief flash of doubt crosses his mind as he questions his own, but that fleeting hesitation instantly sparks a brilliant new strategy. He suggests that unearthing ancient strongholds could pump massive amounts of power and riches straight back into their... Her eyes widen in shock as the genius of his makeshift master plan finally clicks. He reveals that he recently scouted the perfect jackpot location to solve their crisis. The domain of Midibar, he declares, naming the lost territory of the forgotten goddess of wisdom. It is the exact same legendary vista that Yaiden used to watch over every single day, right above the ancient city of Night. Deep within those ignored ruins lies a trove of glowing steel just waiting to be claimed. He smirks, noting that once word of this gold mine leaks out, mercenaries from every corner of Robberland will come swarming in like flies. It hits her like a lightning bolt, a desperately brilliant and utterly irresistible scheme. Flash forward and we see him commanding a caravan of riders deep into the dense, overgrown woods. A wave of nervous tension ripples through the ranks, with plenty of grunts doubting the sanity of this incredibly sudden expedition. They whisper among themselves, incredibly suspicious that these magical excavation rumors conveniently popped up right during the bloody chaos of the Great Purge. He silently tunes in as one frustrated soldier openly complains about abandoning their monster-hunting duties for this wild goose chase. In his mind, he completely understands the backlash greedy merchants despise losing their hired muscle, since a drop in fighters equals a massive hit to their profit margins. But their petty anger just makes him smirk, already relishing the absolute meltdown they are going to have once this legendary fortress is finally exposed. Shifting his focus, he turns back to Kalsarik and casually asks if the Brotherhood is locked in their next move. The rugged spokesman swears that all 5 brothers will pledge their blades to him for an entire year, just to pay off the massive, but he hesitates, confessing that a permanent loyalty oath is off the table until they can regroup with the rest of their clan and sort out. The dark-haired commander cuts right through the excuses, bluntly stating that they simply lack the guts to fully commit their lives to his cause. Struck right in the pride, the spokesman falls completely silent, shifting awkwardly in his saddle. The leader flashes a cold smile, sighing that it is a real shame because they are throwing away their one and only ticket to claiming a ruined castle. Staring into those piercing eyes, the mercenary realizes with a jolt of shock. Finally the procession halts, and he proudly announces that they have hit the jackpot. The crew squints at a massive tangled mess of thick vines and boulders, utterly unimpressed by what looks like a pile of completely normal rocks. But to his trained eyes, the legendary architecture is unmistakably clear, even though centuries of nature have tried to bury its secrets. Where they see dirt, he envisions the glorious, breathtaking metropolis that was mysteriously wiped clean from the history books. The men start grumbling, firmly insisting that this whole trip is a scam. With a quiet confidence, he tells them they are literally standing inside the ruins right now. To prove his point, he draws his blade and unleashes a massive, sweeping slash right into the thick brush. The razor-sharp shockwave shreds the dense moss and violently ripping away nature's ancient camouflage. The mercenaries stumble back in pure disbelief as massive geometric structures suddenly pierce through the falling foliage. What they mistook for pathetic boulders are instantly revealed. Lured by the jaw-dropping find, the hired blades creep closer, their eyes glued to the mysterious ruins. A rugged fighter brushes his fingers against the flawless, jointless stone. His jaw hits the floor. This kind of impossible craftsmanship screams of the forgotten. Snapping them out of their trance, the raven-haired boss barks out a sharp command. Playtime is over. He orders the crew to rip away the thick, tangled moss. The squad instantly jumps into action, fueled by the intoxicating scent of unimaginable wealth. With every vine they hack away, more ancient architecture emerges from the shadows, stretching out endlessly. "Hey, I got another wall here," someone yells. Seconds later, a different voice hollers out, uncovering a secret, ivy-choked entrance. Beneath the grime, a blinding flash of polished metal catches the sun. It's Lucera steel, a pristine relic of war, miraculously surviving the ravages of time. One merc hoists the gleaming weapon high, his voice trembling as he shouts, "Holy crap!" Another fighter snatches up a second blade right nearby. All around, jagged chunks of pristine armor are yanked from the dirt, cranking the crew's gold fever up to 11. In a mere heartbeat, 3 priceless, legendary blades are gleaming in the open. Pure shock rapidly morphs into explosive, unadulterated greed. It finally clicks for their spokesman. These aren't just random bold. This isn't a mere archaeological dig. It's a massive sleeping metropolis. The raven-haired commander flashes a dangerously smug smirk, welcoming them to his new domain. Like an emperor crowning his own territory, he dramatically dubs the breathtaking expanse the ancient city of glowing steel. He lays out the brutal truth. This place is so ridiculously massive, dragging it out of the dirt will take a small army of muscle and daring adventurers. Dollar signs flash in the eyes of the gritty mercenaries, completely spellbound by the sheer, staggering scale of the jackpot. They practically trample each other, swarming Count Ranson, desperately pleading with the noble to see the mind-blowing fortune right beneath. But the dark-haired boss waves off their frantic questions, smoothly delaying the business talk until they hit town. He's absolutely... Count Ranson shifts uncomfortably, the words choking in his throat as he battles his own pride. The young leader pivots, locking his intense gaze on the aristocrat, silently daring him to just spit it out. His face burning beet red, the usually arrogant noble actually... The boss blinks, completely caught off guard by the grown man's sudden flustered blushing and super awkward fumbling. Taking a deep breath, the Count drops the bomb. He doesn't just want a temporary contract anymore. He wants to play. Just a handful of days pass, and explosive rumors are already setting the rugged borderlands absolutely ablaze. Whispers of a colossal city-sized graveyard unearthed in Kushan are drawing hungry fighters like moths to a flame. The second the street catches wind that priceless relics and legendary armor are practically spilling out of the dirt, a frenzied stampede of greedy nobles, slick merchants, to Kushan becomes the battle cry echoing across every tavern and guild hall, sucking the entire realm into this untamed, wildly lucrative new frontier. It's the calm before the ultimate storm. The whole continent practically holds its breath, bracing for the chaotic goal. Cut back to the urban stronghold. The dark-haired visionary eyes his inner circle, stating coldly that the past 72 hours just violently proved exactly who his loyal crew stands completely frozen, hanging on his every word, as he officially sparks the ignition of their brutal new world order. But the honeymoon phase is over, he warns. Now comes the blood. They have to protect their new empire from ravenous monsters banging on the gates, and slippery thieves, cutthroats, and that unpredictable count lurking inside. Still, his voice softens with fierce ambition. They are teetering right on the razor sharp, a destiny that their tragic, blood-stained pasts had brutally denied them until this. With the colossal wealth of this lost city, they will resurrect their shattered family name, forge a dominating new kingdom from scratch, and maybe, just maybe, Rip Van Roast. He locks eyes with his team, making it crystal clear. This glorious future isn't strictly for the pure Van Ro bloodline. It belongs equally to the scrappy adopted siblings. The fiery, orange-haired youth swallows hard, letting those heavy, validating words ignite a quiet, unshakable fire in his chest. He turns to the azure-haired boy, promising that one day every single one of them will birth their own legendary noble houses. They will rebuild from the ashes, but to claim that throne, they have to shatter their current limits and evolve. That's exactly why he dragged them out of bed before dawn. Starting today, this brutal, bone-breaking early hour is their new daily training ground. A fierce, hungry grin stretches across the blue-haired student's face. Their mentor draws his blade, revealing he's about to pass down a lethal combat style he just managed to perfect. It's a ruthless technique, forged from pure physical mastery, totally ignoring magical aura. The orange-haired kid blinks in pure shock. Wait, his master cuts off his doubts immediately. If they want to crush ordinary aura-reliant swordsmen, they absolutely must master the unforgiving bleeding-edge fundamentals of raw steel first. The red-haired girl pieces it together. This brutal discipline has to be the driving force behind his massive power spike. He gives a simple nod. Thrilled by the confirmation, the younger siblings immediately plead for him to take them under his wing. A sly, satisfied smirk creeps across his face. He commands them to unsheathe their blades as he lays out the ground rules. Rule number 1 out here on the training grounds: he isn't their loving brother or senior. He is their master, and mercy is completely off. Rule number 2 for the next 24 hours straight through: eating, sleeping, and everything in between. Those drawn swords stay glued to their hands. Holding up a third finger, he drops the final, absolutely ruthless condition: survive by any means necessary. Before they can even blink, he daring them to deflect it however they can. Katrina gets completely blindsided as his casual apology drops only after his blade is already flying toward her. With a mocking grin, he jokes that the oldest always takes the first hit, using it as a twisted excuse for a sucker punch. His wooden practice sword slams into Katrina's guard so violently she barely registers the impact. The rest of the crew flinches in pure shock, realizing this training is about to be a world of physical pain. He smoothly shrugs it off, claiming a wooden blade could never deal any real damage. But then he drops a harsh reality check. You only forge true strength by taking a brutal beating. True mastery, he preaches, only awakens when you swing until your mind goes completely numb, forging an unbreakable bond with the steel in your hands. Bottom line: treat this sparring match like a life-or-death battle. He instantly drives that point home, shattering the red-haired girl's defense and leaving her screaming in pain. While she groans, he sarcastically reminds her that she kept calling her handsome older brother Mr. instead of showing proper respect. Next in line is the blue-haired woman. He smacks her down, accusing her of scheming with the rebel faction right under his nose. The blue-haired guy eats a heavy strike next, getting roasted for trying way too hard to act mature, looking like a little kid just pretending to be an adult. The orange-haired student doesn't escape either, taking a beating, while his teacher gleefully points out that his cocky attitude isn't doing him any favors right now. After unleashing that relentless tornado of strength, the master finally pauses to catch his breath. Looking wildly energized rather than exhausted, he boldly confesses it has been way too long since he let loose like this, and honestly, it felt absolutely amazing. Battered, bruised, and totally offended, the trainees decide their instructor is an absolute psychopath for giggling while beating them to a pulp. Despite the pain, Katrina flashes a defiant smirk and announces they are officially done acting like human punching bags. The orange-haired fighter barks out an order, launching a fiercely coordinated group ambush. But even that all-out assault crumbles as the black-haired master swats them away like flies. Weapons clash in a massive shockwave, brutally highlighting the massive gap in their skill levels. Towering over his flattened students, the instructor casually trashes their pathetic attempt at resistance. The orange-haired kid stays glued to the dirt, shaking violently and totally out of gas. The blue-haired woman and another fighter hit the deck too, completely drained and basically begging for the sweet release of death just to escape another drill. The master just turns away, clinically analyzing their limits, without a single ounce of pity. Dragging his battered body back up, the white-haired kid refuses to quit. Clenching his jaw tight, he gets the order to meet with Sora and keep pushing forward. Rewinding that group ambush in his head, the master zeroes in on the white-haired fighter to grade his performance. He visualizes their four-man rush, admitting the squad actually nailed the tactical formation. Breaking it down, he notes the white-haired kid had textbook form and blistering speed, but blew his opening by hesitating for a split second. The master spots raw talent, but also a dangerous lack of confidence, deciding to keep a close watch instead of breaking him down further. Calling it a wrap for the day, he finally shuts down the hellish boot camp. Kicking back under the sunset, he happily summons the battered crew for a debrief. Seiya, still face-planted in the dirt, would literally rather die than move a muscle. Meanwhile, whispers of the newly unearthed ruins sweep across Robertland, eventually catching the attention of the massive superpower looming in the northwest. Over in Kushan, a richly adorned sovereign perks up the second that ancient city's name reaches his ears. Hearing the confirmation of Zeus's demise and the unearthing of a primordial metropolis, he instantly smells a colossal opportunity. Viewing this golden omen as a divine mandate, he barks an order to mobilize a rapid strike unit of... In a high-stakes scramble like this, he declares sheer velocity trumps absolutely everything. Catching the frantic drift, his lieutenant dips into a crisp bat. This ambitious monarch, unmasked as Haroon the Gale King, confesses with a wicked grin that this intel has stoked his blood more than anything in recent memory. Meanwhile, back in Gloryland, the camera pans to our hero's freshly acquired manor. Golden dawn light spills over the jagged peaks, signaling the kickoff of their next strategic master plan. Gazing out from his balcony, our guy smirks. That brutal cleansing operation actually scored him some prime rent-free real estate. Pivoting on his heel, he strides indoors to kick off their scheduled strategies. Seo marches in, juggling a stack of paperwork, and her sheathed blade grumbling about why he forces her to stay armed to the teeth during a simple briefing. He waves off her complaints, promising she will thank him for the paranoia later on. Huddling around the oak desk, she demands to know what massive emergency dragged. Cutting to the chase, she admits she went digging into the Book of Fate, desperate to prove if his temporal jump actually rewrote their current timeline. He scoffs. Surviving physical, but Seo slaps down a battered manuscript, daring him to look before he leaps to conclusions. Scanning the weathered pages, his eyes widen. This might be the exact smoking gun there. She breaks it down. It is a 2-century-old archaeological dig log, detailing the recovery of a mythical potion. The crucial catch. The log explicitly notes that exactly half of the brew was missing upon discovery. That tiny detail hits him like a freight train. Did his ancient meddling genuinely ripple into their modern reality? Not giving him a second to breathe, this one, she declares, is an intact charcoal tracing, pulled straight off an archaic stone monolith. The etched imagery showcases a brutal clash against a monstrous canine. Hidden within the faded runic script, one deciphered sentence screams out a desperate prayer, begging someone to salvage their doomed city. But our hero completely tunes out the tragic lore. His gaze locks entirely on that sketched weapon, sensing an eerie, mirrored familiarity. He zeroes in on the flipped, crescent-shaped hilt, a custom forge, far too bizarre to be a mere coincidence. Then the jaw-dropping truth clicks. That engraved mural is literally depicting him fighting shoulder to shoulder with Aiden. Seo nods gravely. That warrior is undeniably him, hammering home the insane reality that his temporal voyage permanently sculpted their present day. Leaning in, she issues a stern warning. Since his butterfly effect footprint can radically warp their era, every future step must be calculated with surgical precision. His mind flashes back to the artifact's core mechanic. It literally devours shattered casualties just to crank back the clock. One wrong move means absolute game over. Piecing the puzzle together, he realizes this mystic tome does not want to protect the timeline. It actively hungers for historical deviation. If this sentient relic can bulldoze through timelines, regardless of his caution, then the entire past might be rigged from the start. Frowning, Seo questions the true endgame of this cursed ledger. Is it desperately trying to stall an ancient apocalypse? Or is it chasing a much darker, concealed agenda? Hitting a solid brick wall, she pitches a risky gambit, jumpstart the relic one more time, to mine for concrete answers. He counters, suggesting they raid a location deeply anchored to the heretics. They quickly pinpoint Kushan del Kashu's former stomping grounds as their prime target. He theorizes that Zeus likely siphoned all the cult's dirty secrets straight through del Kashu's tainted bloodline, meaning the dusty streets of Kushan are practically begging to be searched for left. Riding that train of thought, he asks if that desert stronghold is hiding its very own corrupted sanctuary. Seo confirms that a shadowed shrine is almost guaranteed to be lurking under the city. He grins. It is like hitting two birds with one stone, seeing as they already needed to scrub away the lingering rot of Zeus's empire. He stamps down his verdict. The second their home turf is locked down and fortified, they are marching straight out to conquer Kushan. Shifting gears, Seo rolls out a massive... She points out that with the Empire currently strangling most of Gloryland, a mindless frontal assault would be pure suicide. To crack that iron grip, they need to orchestrate a crushing Her strategy for the Western theater hinges on forging pacts with bordering nations, violently suffocating the Empire's most lucrative trade pipelines. Crushing the Southern vanguard instantly hands them Arandia, locking down absolute dominance over the oceanic shipping lanes. Meanwhile, sweeping the eastern flank requires violently hijacking the economic lifeblood pumping straight through Robberland. Yet, before dreaming of this grand conquest, they absolutely have to conquer Harun's Elmin territory, along with Jaffar's Shimalman sector. She makes it dead. This entire glorious campaign crumbles to dust before the first